The cloth moved in precise, practiced circles across the Schmidt and Bender scope, each stroke deliberate and methodical. Elena Vasquez had cleaned thousands of these high-end optics over the past 3 years at Precision Defense Solutions, but her hands still moved with the same reverence she'd shown the first day. The small workshop smelled of gun oil and metal polish, a combination that somehow felt more like home than her actual apartment ever had. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. She paused, holding the scope up to the fluorescent light, checking for any remaining smudges on the pristine glass. Perfect clarity. That's what separated life from death in the field. She'd learned that lesson the hard way, in a place she tried very hard not to remember. The small silver fragment caught the light as she reached for another cleaning cloth. It hung from a thin chain around her neck, usually hidden beneath her work shirt, but the morning heat had made her push her collar open. The metal was worn smooth from years of unconscious touching, a nervous habit she'd never been able to break. Vasquez. She looked up to see Tom Bradley, the shop owner, standing in the doorway with a man she didn't recognize. The stranger wore civilian clothes, dark jeans and a black polo, but everything about his posture screamed military. The way he held his shoulders, the economical movements, the constant subtle scan of his surroundings. Elena had seen that bearing 1,000 times before. "This is Major Richards," Tom said, his voice carrying an unusual formality. "He's got some specialized equipment that needs our best work." Major Richards stepped forward, extending his hand with a professional smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Ms. Vasquez. Tom tells me you're the best scope technician this side of the Mississippi." Elena shook his hand, noting the calluses on his trigger finger and the faint tan line where he usually wore a watch, probably removed for operational security. "Just doing my job, sir." "No need for formalities, call me Jack." His eyes swept the workbench, taking in the array of tools and partially disassembled optics. "Impressive setup you have here." As he leaned closer to examine her work, his gaze fell on the small silver fragment at her throat. For just a moment, his professional composure cracked. His eyes widened slightly, and Elena saw recognition flash across his features, the kind of recognition that made her blood run cold. She instinctively reached up to tuck the pendant back beneath her shirt, but it was too late. Major Richards, Jack, had seen it, more than seen it. He knew what it was. "That's an interesting piece of jewelry," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made the air in the small workshop feel suddenly thin. Elena's hand closed around the fragment, feeling its familiar edges press into her palm. "Family heirloom," she said, the lie coming as easily as breathing. She'd told it so many times over the years that it almost felt true. But Jack Richards wasn't buying it. His eyes had gone hard and calculating, and when he looked at her now, it wasn't as a civilian contractor. It was the way one soldier looked at another, with a mixture of respect and wariness that made Elena's chest tighten with memories she'd spent 3 years trying to bury. "Tom," Jack said without breaking eye contact with Elena, "would it be possible for Ms. Vasquez and me to discuss the technical specifications privately? Some of this equipment involves classified modifications." Elena felt the walls of the small workshop closing in around her. She wanted to run, wanted to grab her keys, and disappear the way she'd done 3 years ago when everything fell apart. But she'd built a life here, a quiet life where nobody asked questions about her past, or why a 28-year-old woman had the steady hands of a veteran sniper and the haunted eyes of someone who'd seen too much. "Of course," Tom said, though Elena could hear the confusion in his voice. "I'll be in the front office if you need anything." As Tom's footsteps faded, the silence stretched between Elena and Jack like a tripwire. She could feel him studying her, cataloging details she'd spent years learning to hide. The way she positioned herself with clear sightlines to both exits. The unconscious assessment of potential weapons within arm's reach. The controlled breathing that came from years of taking impossible shots under impossible pressure. "You know what this is," Elena said finally, her fingers still wrapped around the silver fragment. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded slowly. "Part of a silver star. 3rd class, if I'm not mistaken. Awarded for gallantry in action." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "The question is, how did Elena Vasquez, civilian contractor, come to possess a piece of one of our nation's highest military honors?" Elena's mind raced through possible responses, explanations that might satisfy his curiosity without revealing the truth. But looking at Jack Richards, seeing the intelligence in his dark eyes and the patient way he waited for her answer, she knew that any lie she told would only make things worse. Because Jack Richards wasn't just asking about the pendant. He was asking about the woman who'd once been Sergeant Elena Vasquez, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. The woman who'd taken an impossible shot in the mountains of Afghanistan and saved 17 American lives. The woman who'd been decorated for valor and then quietly disappeared from the Army's records 6 months later. The woman whose silver star had been shattered by the same IED blast that killed her spotter and left her with scars that went far deeper than the ones hidden beneath her long sleeves. "I think," Elena said carefully, setting down the scope she'd been cleaning with hands that barely trembled, "that you already know the answer to that question, Major Richards. Before we dive deeper into this incredible story, I want to take a moment to thank you for watching. Creating and narrating these detailed, novel-length stories takes tremendous time and research to bring you the most engaging content possible. We're embarking on a journey of nearly 50,000 words together. That's a full novella. If you're already hooked by what you've heard, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this story with someone who would enjoy it, and subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. This is going to be an epic adventure, so get comfortable and let's continue with this remarkable tale. Jack Richards had seen that look before, the careful calculation of someone deciding whether to run or fight. Elena Vasquez stood frozen behind her workbench, her knuckles white around the silver fragment, and for a moment he thought she might actually bolt for the door. Instead, she surprised him. With deliberate movements, she pulled the chain over her head and set the pendant on the workbench between them. Under the harsh workshop lights, the metal's true nature was unmistakable. The distinctive silver alloy, the partial engraving along one edge, the clean break where it had been severed from the rest of the star. "Sergeant Elena Maria Vasquez," she said, her voice steady despite the way her hands trembled slightly. "1st Battalion, 75th Rangers. Designated marksman. Honorably discharged November 2021. Jack studied the fragment, then looked back at her face. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The precision of her work, the military bearing she couldn't quite suppress, the way she'd positioned herself in the workshop. "Operation Resolute Guardian," he said quietly. "FOB Chapman, October 2021. Elena's face went white. "How do you—" "Because I was there." Jack reached into his wallet and pulled out a small photograph, edges worn from years of handling. It showed a group of soldiers posing in front of a Chinook helicopter, their faces dusty and exhausted but smiling. "Second row, 4th from the left." Elena leaned forward, her eyes scanning the photograph until they found his younger face. Then her gaze moved to the front row, to a smaller figure with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun, and the distinctive rifle of a designated marksman slung across her shoulders. "My God," she whispered, "you were with the QRF team." "Quick Reaction Force, 2nd Platoon." Jack pocketed the photograph. "We were supposed to extract your reconnaissance element after the intelligence gathering was complete. Instead, we found ourselves pinned down in a valley with half the Taliban in Kunar province shooting at us." Elena sank onto the tall stool behind her workbench, her professional composure finally cracking. "The ambush. They knew we were coming." 17 of us trapped in that valley for 8 hours, Jack continued, his voice taking on the clinical tone soldiers used when discussing operations that had gone sideways. No air support because of the weather, limited ammunition, and enemy fighters on every ridgeline. We were taking casualties and running out of options. "Until someone started picking off the machine gun nests," Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. "One impossible shot after another. Targets at ranges that shouldn't have been feasible with the equipment we had. Crosswinds that would have thrown off most snipers by feet, not inches." Jack leaned against the workbench, studying her face. "Command estimated later that without those shots we would have lost at least 12 men. Instead, we all made it home." Elena's hand moved unconsciously to her left shoulder, where Jack now noticed the slight stiffness in how she held it. "Not all of us." "Marcus Chen," Jack said softly, "your spotter." The name hung between them like a physical weight. Elena closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Jack saw the pain she'd been carrying for 3 years. He was 19, she said. Wanted to be a teacher when he got out. Used to show me pictures of his girlfriend back in Seattle, talk about the ring he was going to buy her. She picked up the pendant, rolling it between her fingers. The IED went off 6 hours after the firefight ended. We thought we were safe. We were supposed to be safe. Jack had read the after-action reports, knew the clinical details of what had happened. An improvised explosive device hidden in the rubble of a compound they'd been using for shelter. 2 soldiers wounded, 1 killed instantly, but reading reports and sitting across from a survivor were very different things. The blast threw me 20 feet, Elena continued, her voice steady but distant. When I came to, Marcus was... She shook her head. The medic said a piece of shrapnel went right through his chest. He died before the medevac arrived. And you blamed yourself. I was the senior enlisted on that patrol. My job to keep him safe. Elena's grip tightened on the pendant. This was in my chest pocket when the bomb went off. The blast broke it clean off the ribbon. I found it in the hospital 3 days later, and it seemed fitting somehow, like it knew it didn't belong to me anymore. Jack understood. He'd seen good soldiers destroy themselves over survivors' guilt, watched decorated warriors convince themselves they were frauds because they'd lived when others hadn't. It was a particular kind of poison that ate at a person from the inside out. Tom Bradley told me you've been working here for 3 years, he said, changing the subject slightly. Says you're the most precise technician he's ever employed. It's honest work. Nobody gets hurt if I do my job right. Elena managed a weak smile. Turns out there's not a huge civilian market for military snipers, especially ones with PTSD and a medical discharge. Medical discharge? Elena rolled up her left sleeve, revealing a network of scars that ran from her wrist to her elbow. Shrapnel damaged the nerve cluster. I can still use the arm, but the fine motor control isn't what it used to be. Can't hold a rifle steady for more than a few minutes. Jack studied the scars, understanding now why she'd chosen precision optics as a career. It was as close as she could get to her old life, without the physical demands that her injuries wouldn't allow. What brings a Special Forces major to a small scope shop in Colorado Springs? Elena asked, deflecting attention from her own story. Would you believe routine maintenance? Not for a second. Jack smiled, the first genuine expression Elena had seen from him. Fair enough. I'm here because we have a problem, and Tom Bradley's reputation suggested his best technician might be able to help us solve it. Elena raised an eyebrow. What kind of problem? The kind that requires someone who understands both precision optics and unconventional warfare. Jack glanced toward the front office, making sure Tom was still occupied. Are you familiar with the Meridian Group? The name sent a chill down Elena's spine. Private military contractors. High-end stuff. Corporate security, government consultation, training programs for foreign militaries. That's their public face. Intelligence suggests they've expanded into less legitimate activities. Arms trafficking, mercenary operations, selling military expertise to the highest bidder, regardless of their politics or human rights record. Elena felt her pulse quicken. And this concerns me how? Because 3 weeks ago, someone stole 42 advanced targeting systems from a classified Department of Defense facility. Systems that make the scopes you work on look like toys from a cereal box. Thermal imaging, ballistic computers, laser rangefinders, everything a sniper needs to make shots at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. 42 systems, Elena repeated. That's enough to equip an entire company of marksmen, or sell to the highest bidders around the world. Jack pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph of one of the stolen systems. It looked like something from a science fiction movie. Sleek black housing covering advanced electronics with an objective lens larger than Elena's fist. The Meridian Group has been actively recruiting experienced military snipers over the past 6 months, offering substantial signing bonuses to anyone with combat experience. Elena set down the pendant and really looked at Jack for the first time. You think they're building a private army of precision shooters? I think they're planning something that requires a lot of very accurate long-range shooting. And I think those stolen targeting systems are going to give them capabilities that could destabilize entire regions. Jack pocketed his phone. The problem is, we don't know where they're training or when they plan to deploy. So why come to me, Like I said, I'm just a civilian contractor now." Jack pointed to the pendant. "Because that piece of metal represents the kind of skill and experience we need. Someone who understands advanced optics, knows how military snipers think, and has actually used precision shooting to save lives under combat conditions." Elena felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever someone asked her to be the soldier she used to be. "I can't. The medical discharge wasn't just about my arm, Major. I have panic attacks, nightmares, the whole PTSD package. I'm not fit for any kind of operational duty." "I'm not asking you to pick up a rifle," Jack said gently. "I'm asking you to help us understand the technology they've stolen and maybe provide some insight into how they might use it." Elena looked around the workshop that had become her sanctuary, the orderly rows of tools, the completed scopes awaiting pickup, the simple routine that had kept her sane for 3 years. Getting involved with Jack Richards and his stolen targeting systems would mean leaving that safety behind, stepping back into a world where people died and the choices she made could determine who lived and who didn't. But she also remembered 17 soldiers pinned down in an Afghan valley and how it had felt to know that her skills could mean the difference between their families getting their loved ones back or receiving folded flags. "What exactly would you need me to do?" she asked. Jack's expression brightened slightly. "Start by looking at these technical specifications and telling me what capabilities they represent." He pulled a tablet from his briefcase and set it on the workbench. "Then, if you're willing, we might need your help figuring out where someone would take 42 people to train them on equipment like this." Elena picked up the tablet and began scrolling through the technical documents. The specifications were incredible: effective ranges of over 3 kilometers, automatic wind compensation, target tracking capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. In the wrong hands, these systems could turn mediocre shooters into precision killers capable of striking targets from distances that made detection and retaliation nearly impossible. "This is military science fiction," she murmured, studying the ballistic computer specifications. "With systems like these, a competent marksman could take out targets from the next zip code. Now imagine 42 of them in the hands of people with no oversight and no accountability." Elena set down the tablet and looked at Jack. "If I help you with this, I need to know something first. Is this official? Are you here representing the Army, or is this some kind of off-the-books operation?" Jack hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Elena to know the answer wasn't simple. "It's official in that my superiors know I'm here and have authorized me to seek consultation on this matter. It's unofficial in that any operational activity would likely fall outside normal military channels. Black Ops. Gray Ops. We're not planning to invade anywhere or assassinate foreign leaders. But we might need to recover stolen property in ways that don't appear in tomorrow's newspapers." Elena understood. The kind of operations that happened in the shadows, where deniability was more important than recognition and success, was measured by the absence of consequences, rather than the presence of medals. She thought about Marcus Chen, about the promise she'd made at his funeral to never again put herself in a position where her decisions could get someone killed. Then she thought about what 42 precision rifle systems could do in the hands of mercenaries with no conscience and no rules of engagement. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "I want to be clear about my limitations. I can't shoot like I used to. I can't handle stress like I used to. And if things go sideways, I might not be the asset you think you're getting." "Understood." Jack extended his hand. "Are you willing to help us stop these systems from being used against innocent people?" Elena looked at his outstretched hand, then at the silver fragment lying on her workbench. For 3 years, she'd carried that broken piece of her silver star as a reminder of her failures, her limitations, her reasons for staying hidden from the world that had once defined her. Maybe it was time to let it represent something else. She shook Jack's hand. "Where do we start?" Quote. The next morning, Elena found herself in the passenger seat of Jack's unmarked SUV, driving through the Colorado countryside toward what he'd described as a quote, secure facility for technical consultation. The landscape rolled past in shades of brown and gold, autumn painting the aspens in brilliant yellows that reminded her of the Afghan highlands during her deployment. "Tell me about the theft," she said, studying the classified briefing materials Jack had provided. 42 systems don't just walk out of a DoD facility without inside help. Jack navigated a winding mountain road with the easy competence of someone accustomed to tactical driving. Meridian Group has been recruiting heavily from recently separated military personnel. Not just combat arms, they've been particularly interested in logistics specialists, intelligence analysts, and anyone with security clearances. Someone on the inside? We think so. The theft was too clean, too precise. They knew exactly which systems to take, when the security rotations would leave them vulnerable, and how to disable the tracking devices without triggering alarms. Jack downshifted as they climbed a steep grade. It was a professional job by people who understood the facility's security protocols. Elena flipped through photographs of the crime scene. Any surveillance footage? Mysteriously corrupted. The backup systems also malfunctioned at exactly the right time. Jack's tone carried the frustration of someone who'd seen one too many convenient coincidences. Whoever planned this had detailed knowledge of the facility's electronic security systems. What about the Meridian Group itself? Corporate structure, financing, leadership? Jack pulled off the main road onto a gravel path marked only by a small sign reading, quote, 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 Pine Ridge Research Station. That's where things get interesting. Officially, Meridian is owned by a consortium of international investors with interests in defense contracting. Unofficially, our intelligence suggests they're being bankrolled by a combination of foreign governments and criminal organizations. The research station turned out to be a complex of low, modern buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. It looked like a technology campus or exclusive retreat, which Elena supposed was probably the point. Nothing about the architecture suggested military or intelligence operations. "Who runs the station?" she asked, as Jack parked in front of the main building. "Colonel Sarah Martinez, retired Army intelligence. She's been working on anti-terrorism initiatives since leaving active duty." Jack gathered his briefcase and tablet. She's also the person who originally identified the Meridian Group as a potential threat. Elena felt her stomach tighten at the mention of meeting another high-ranking military officer. In her experience, colonels tended to ask pointed questions about career decisions and medical discharges. "Does she know about my background?" "She knows you're a subject matter expert with relevant experience. The specifics of your service record are classified at her clearance level." Jack must have noticed her tension because his voice became reassuring. "Sarah Martinez is good people, Elena. She's not going to judge you for what happened in Afghanistan." They were met at the entrance by a woman in her early 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of confident bearing that suggested she'd earned her rank rather than inherited it. Colonel Martinez wore civilian clothes, dark slacks and a navy blazer, but like Jack, her military background was unmistakable. "Ms. Vasquez," she said, extending her hand with a warm smile, "thank you for coming. I understand you have expertise that could be invaluable to our investigation." Elena shook her hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Happy to help however I can, Colonel." "Please, call me Sarah. We're all civilians here." Martinez gestured toward the building's interior. "Major Richards has briefed you on the general situation?" "Stolen targeting systems, possible mercenary training operation, international implications." Elena followed them through a lobby that could have belonged to any high-tech company. "I'm still not entirely clear on what you need from me." "Two things," Martinez said as they entered an elevator. "First, we need someone with your technical background to help us understand exactly what capabilities these stolen systems represent. Second, we're hoping your operational experience might give us insights into how and where someone would train mercenaries to use equipment like this." The elevator opened onto a floor that looked nothing like the corporate facade below. This was clearly a working intelligence facility. Banks of monitors, secure communication stations, walls covered with maps and photographs connected by colored string. Elena counted at least a dozen analysts working at various stations, their security badges marking them as cleared for classified material. "Impressive setup," she murmured to Jack. "Pine Ridge is officially a private research facility studying counterterrorism methodologies," Martinez said, overhearing her comment. "Unofficially, it's where we work on problems that don't fit neatly into any single agency's jurisdiction." They entered a conference room where the walls were covered with enlarged photographs of the stolen targeting systems, technical specifications, and what appeared to be surveillance photos of various individuals. Elena recognized the format from military intelligence briefings, the kind of comprehensive threat assessment that preceded special operations. Before we go any further, Martinez said, closing the door behind them, I need to establish the classification level of this discussion. Ms. Vasquez, are you willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding anything you see or hear in this facility? Elena looked around the room, taking in the scope of the investigation displayed on the walls. How deep does this go, Colonel? Deep enough that 42 precision rifle systems in the wrong hands could destabilize 3 different regions and potentially spark conflicts that would make the Afghan war look like a minor border dispute. Martinez's expression was grave. We're not talking about bank robberies or corporate espionage. We're talking about the potential for state-sponsored terrorism using American military technology. Elena felt the familiar weight of consequence settling on her shoulders. What exactly are you asking me to do? Jack stepped forward. Help us understand the technology, analyze the tactical implications. And if we can identify where this training is taking place, possibly provide on-site technical expertise to recover the stolen systems. On-site technical expertise, Elena repeated. That's a polite way of saying you want me to go into the field. Only if necessary, Martinez said quickly. And only in a support capacity. We're not asking you to pick up a rifle. Elena studied the photographs on the walls, recognizing some of the faces from intelligence briefings during her deployment. The Meridian Group had apparently been recruiting from a pool of highly experienced former military personnel, the kind of people who could turn advanced targeting systems into weapons of mass destruction. If I sign your NDA and help with this investigation, she said slowly, I need guarantees about my involvement. No operational deployment without my explicit consent. No situations where I'm expected to engage targets or make life-or-death tactical decisions. And if my PTSD becomes an issue, I want the right to withdraw from the operation immediately. Martinez nodded. Agreed on all counts. We need your expertise, not your trigger finger. Elena looked at Jack, who gave her an encouraging nod. All right, she said. Show me what you've got. For the next 2 hours, Elena immersed herself in the technical specifications of the stolen targeting systems. The capabilities were staggering. Not just improved accuracy and range, but integrated systems that could automatically calculate ballistic solutions, track moving targets, and even coordinate fires between multiple shooters. This isn't just advanced sniper equipment, she told Martinez and Jack as she studied the interconnected systems architecture. It's a force multiplier that could turn a handful of competent marksmen into a precision strike capability, rivaling what we had in special operations. Martinez leaned forward. What kind of training would someone need to use these systems effectively? Elena considered the question, thinking back to her own training and the months of preparation required to become proficient with much simpler equipment. The systems themselves are intuitive enough that anyone with basic marksmanship skills could learn to operate them in a few weeks. But to use them effectively in operational scenarios, coordinating fires, engaging multiple targets, operating under stress, that would require months of intensive training. Where would someone conduct that kind of training? Jack asked. Somewhere remote, with multiple firing positions at various ranges and enough space to practice coordinated team tactics. Elena pulled up a map on one of the tablets. You'd need a facility with ranges extending to at least 3 kilometers, varied terrain for different engagement scenarios, and absolute security to keep the training activities hidden. Martinez made notes on a legal pad. Any thoughts on geographic requirements? Elena studied the map, drawing on her knowledge of military training facilities and operational requirements. Climate considerations would be important. You'd want to train in conditions similar to where the systems might eventually be deployed. If they're planning operations in desert environments, they'd want dry, hot conditions. If they're looking at mountain or urban scenarios, different requirements. What about existing facilities? Jack asked. Could they use an abandoned military installation or private training ground? Possible, but risky. Too much chance of discovery or satellite surveillance. Elena traced potential locations on the map. More likely, they'd find something that looks legitimate on the surface. A hunting ranch, private gun club, corporate retreat center. Somewhere they could conduct training activities without attracting attention. Martinez pulled up a different map on the large monitor at the front of the room. We've identified 17 facilities in the western United States that might fit those criteria. Most are privately owned hunting ranches or shooting sports facilities with ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. Elena studied the locations, noting their proximity to major airports and highways, factors that would be important for moving personnel and equipment discreetly. Have you conducted surveillance on any of these sites? Limited reconnaissance, Jack said. We can't conduct full-scale surveillance without more specific intelligence pointing to a particular location. Elena nodded, understanding the legal and practical constraints they were working under. What about financial intelligence? Training operations like this would require significant funding, facility rental, equipment transportation, instructor fees, trainee compensation. Those kinds of expenses leave paper trails. Martinez smiled. Now you're thinking like an intelligence analyst. We've been tracking Meridian Group's financial activities, but they're sophisticated about moving money through shell companies and offshore accounts. We know they've made several large payments to entities in Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming over the past 6 months, but we haven't been able to connect those payments to specific facilities. Elena stood and walked to the map, studying the marked locations. Something about the distribution pattern bothered her, but she couldn't quite identify what. Tell me about the recruitment timeline. When did Meridian start actively recruiting former military snipers? Jack consulted his notes. Intensified recruitment began approximately 8 months ago. Most aggressive period was between 4 and 6 months ago. And the theft occurred 3 weeks ago. Correct. Quote, Elena traced her finger along the map, following highways and considering logistical factors. If they've been recruiting for 8 months, but only stole the equipment 3 weeks ago, that suggests they've already completed most of their personnel selection and basic training. The advanced systems would be for final training phases or actual operational deployment. Martinez looked up from her notes. Meaning they're further along in their timeline than we initially thought. Potentially much further along. Elena felt the familiar analytical clarity that came from working a complex tactical problem. If they're following standard special operations training protocols, they'd want to complete advanced systems training within 4 to 6 weeks of acquiring the equipment. That puts their potential deployment window somewhere in the next few weeks. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena looked at the faces around the table and saw the same recognition she was feeling. They weren't investigating a potential future threat. They were racing against a timeline that was already in motion. We need to accelerate our identification of their training facility, Martinez said finally. Ms. Vasquez, would you be willing to accompany reconnaissance teams to evaluate the most likely locations? Elena felt her chest tighten at the prospect of returning to operational activities, but she also understood that her expertise might be the key to stopping whatever the Meridian Group was planning. Field reconnaissance only, she said. Technical assessment and advisory capacity. Understood, Martinez began gathering the briefing materials. We'll begin preparations immediately. Major Richards will be your point of contact for operational coordination. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Elena caught sight of a photograph she'd missed during the initial briefing, a surveillance image of a man in his 40s with graying hair and the kind of cold, calculating expression she'd seen on professional killers. Who's that? She asked, pointing to the photograph. Martinez followed her gaze. Viktor Kozlov, former Russian Spetsnaz. Intelligence suggests he's been working as a military contractor for the past 5 years, specializing in training programs for private military companies. Elena studied the photograph more closely, noting the man's bearing and the way he held himself, even in a candid surveillance shot. Is he connected to the Meridian Group? We believe he's their head instructor for sniper training programs. Jack joined them at the photograph. If our intelligence is correct, Kozlov is the person who would be responsible for training their recruited personnel on the stolen targeting systems. Elena felt a chill of recognition that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She'd seen that same cold professionalism in the eyes of enemy snipers during her deployment, the kind of detached competence that made them so dangerous. If Kozlov is running their training program, she said slowly, then we're not dealing with weekend warriors or corporate security guards. We're dealing with people being trained to military special operations standards. Martinez nodded grimly. Which is why we need to find them before they complete their training and deploy to whatever target they've been assigned. As they left the conference room, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were already behind in a race where second place meant innocent people died. But for the first time in 3 years, She also felt the familiar stirring of purpose that had once driven her to take impossible shots under impossible conditions. The broken silver star fragment hanging around her neck felt less like a reminder of failure and more like a promise that this time, she wouldn't let the people depending on her down. We're deep into this incredible story now, and I hope you're as captivated as I am by these unfolding events. The amount of effort that goes into researching, writing, and narrating these novel-length stories is immense. We're talking about creating content equivalent to a published book. But it's worth it to bring you stories that truly engage and transport you to another world. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please take a second to like this video and share it with friends who appreciate great storytelling. Your support means everything and helps us continue creating these detailed, epic narratives. We still have so much more to discover together, so let's see how this situation unfolds. The helicopter lifted off from Pine Ridge at dawn, carrying Elena into her first operational mission in 3 years. Through the window, she watched the Colorado landscape transform from rolling hills to rugged mountain terrain, each ridge and valley a potential hiding place for the Meridian Group's training operation. "First stop is the Blackwater Ranch," Jack said through the intercom, his voice crackling in her headset. 15,000 acres in Routt County, with confirmed long-range shooting facilities. Elena adjusted her tactical vest, feeling awkward in the military gear she'd thought she'd never wear again. The weight of the ceramic plates and the familiar smell of nylon and cordura brought back memories she'd been trying to suppress. Memories of helicopters carrying her into zones where people died based on the decisions she made. "You okay?" Jack asked, noticing her tension. "Just getting reacquainted with the gear," she replied, though they both knew it was more than that. The panic attacks hadn't started yet, but she could feel the familiar tightness in her chest that usually preceded them. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom. "LZ in sight. Looks clear." Elena looked down at the ranch complex below, a main lodge, several outbuildings, and what appeared to be multiple shooting ranges cut into the hillsides. It looked like hundreds of similar facilities throughout the American West, the kind of place wealthy hunters paid premium prices to pursue elk and mule deer in pristine wilderness settings. The helicopter touched down in a meadow about half a mile from the main complex, close enough for reconnaissance but far enough to avoid detection. Elena felt her heart rate spike as the rotors wound down, and the relative safety of being airborne gave way to the vulnerability of being on the ground in potentially hostile territory. "Remember," Jack said as they unloaded their equipment, "we're wildlife photographers doing a documentary on hunting ranches. You're the technical expert, I'm the producer. Keep it simple." Elena shouldered her pack, which contained high-end camera equipment that would serve as their cover story, along with more specialized surveillance gear. "What if they ask for credentials or permits?" "We have them. Martinez is thorough." Jack checked his GPS and pointed toward a tree line that would provide concealment as they approached the ranch. But the goal is to avoid contact entirely. Get close enough to assess their facilities, document any evidence of advanced training activities, and get out without being detected. They moved through the pine forest with practiced stealth, Elena's muscle memory taking over despite 3 years away from tactical operations. Her body remembered how to move quietly through underbrush, how to use terrain for concealment, how to read the landscape for potential threats. What worried her was how easily those instincts returned, and how much she found herself enjoying the familiar rush of adrenaline. "Observation point," Jack whispered, indicating a rocky outcrop that would give them clear sightlines to the ranch facilities while maintaining concealment. Elena set up the spotting scope, while Jack prepared the long-range camera equipment. Through the high-powered optics, the ranch revealed details that hadn't been visible from the air. The shooting ranges were more extensive than typical hunting facilities, with steel targets at ranges extending well beyond what recreational shooters would need. More telling were the berms and backstops, engineered for high-velocity rounds rather than the traditional hunting rifles used at most guest ranches. "Multiple firing positions," Elena murmured, adjusting the scope's focus. "Ranges from 200 meters out to—" "Jesus, that far target has to be at least 1,500 meters." Jack photographed what she was describing while making notes. "Consistent with training for the stolen targeting systems?" "Very consistent. Those aren't hunting ranges, they're military-grade precision rifle training facilities." Elena swept the scope across the complex, cataloging what she observed. "But I'm not seeing the kind of activity you'd expect from an active training program." no personnel moving between positions, no vehicles that suggest ongoing operations. They spent 2 hours documenting the facility before Elena spotted something that made her blood run cold. "Jack, look at the main lodge. Third window from the left, second floor." Jack adjusted his camera and zoomed in on the window Elena had indicated. In the frame hung a distinctive flag, not American, but the black and red banner of a private military company she recognized from intelligence briefings. "That's not Meridian Group colors," Jack said, photographing the flag. "No, it's worse. That's Crimson Solutions, a PMC that got kicked out of Iraq for using excessive force against civilians." Elena felt her hands begin to tremble slightly. If they're involved in this operation, we're not just dealing with mercenaries, we're dealing with war criminals. Jack lowered his camera and looked at her with concern. "Elena, are you all right?" Quote. She realized she was hyperventilating, the familiar symptoms of a panic attack beginning to overwhelm her. The combination of being in a tactical environment and seeing symbols associated with the worst aspects of private military contracting had triggered responses she thought she had under control. "I need a minute," she managed, setting down the spotting scope with shaking hands. Jack moved closer, positioning himself between her and the direction of the ranch in case anyone was observing their position. "Focus on your breathing. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Elena followed his guidance, using the breathing techniques her VA therapist had taught her. Gradually, her heart rate slowed, and the feeling of impending doom receded. "I'm sorry, I thought I had this under control." "You have nothing to apologize for. PTSD doesn't follow a schedule or respect operational timelines." Jack's voice was gentle but professional. "Do you need to abort this reconnaissance?" Elena looked back toward the ranch, where the Crimson Solutions flag hung in the window like a declaration of malevolent intent. Despite her panic attack, she knew that what they'd discovered was too important to abandon. "No, I can do this, but if Crimson Solutions is involved, we need to treat this as a much more dangerous operation." "Agreed. Let's finish documenting this site and move to the next location." They spent another hour gathering intelligence before moving back to the helicopter landing zone. As they walked through the forest, Elena found herself analyzing what they'd observed from a tactical perspective. Sight lines, defensive positions, escape routes. It was troubling how naturally her mind had shifted back into combat mode. "Tell me about Crimson Solutions," Jack said as they approached the helicopter. "What makes them particularly dangerous?" Elena considered how much to reveal about her knowledge of various PMCs. "They specialize in operations that regular military units can't or won't conduct. Assassinations, false flag operations, training and equipping insurgent groups. They have a reputation for completing missions regardless of civilian casualties or international law. And now they're potentially involved in training mercenaries with stolen American targeting systems. Which means whatever they're planning, it's not going to be limited to corporate security or conventional military operations." Elena felt the pieces of a larger puzzle beginning to form in her mind. Crimson Solutions doesn't get hired for defensive missions, they get hired to kill people. The helicopter pilot was waiting with the rotors already turning, ready for immediate departure. As they lifted off, Elena took one last look at the ranch below. From the air, it looked peaceful and innocuous, just another luxury hunting lodge in the Colorado wilderness. But she knew that appearances could be deceiving, especially when professional killers were involved. "Next stop is the Thunder Mountain facility in Montana," Jack said as they gained altitude, corporate retreat center with private shooting ranges. Elena nodded, but her mind was still processing what they'd discovered at Blackwater Ranch. The presence of Crimson Solutions suggested that the Meridian Group's plans went far beyond simple arms trafficking or mercenary training. They were building something much more dangerous, a precision strike capability that could be deployed anywhere in the world with complete deniability. As the helicopter carried them north toward Montana, Elena found herself thinking about Marcus Chen and the promise she'd made at his funeral. She'd sworn never again to put herself in situations where her decisions could get people killed. But what if her refusal to act would result in even more deaths? The silver fragment pressed against her chest as she considered the implications of what they were discovering. For 3 years, she'd carried it as a reminder of her failures and limitations. But maybe Jack had been right when he suggested it could represent something else. The possibility of redemption through service, even if that service came with risks she'd tried to avoid. The Montana landscape scrolled beneath them, vast and empty, perfect for hiding operations that couldn't withstand scrutiny. Elena knew that somewhere in that wilderness, highly trained killers were preparing to use American military technology for purposes that would shame the nation that had created it. The question was whether she had the courage to help stop them, despite the personal cost of confronting the demons she'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Thunder Mountain Corporate Retreat occupied a valley in the Bitterroot Range, its rustic luxury designed to appeal to executives who wanted to play at being outdoorsmen while maintaining access to high-end amenities. From their observation position on a ridge overlooking the facility, Elena could see why it would appeal to an organization seeking to conduct clandestine training operations. Isolated but accessible, she observed, through the spotting scope. Private airstrip, multiple vehicle approaches, and enough legitimate business activity to provide cover for unusual personnel movements. Jack documented the facility through his telephoto lens while making notes about the security arrangements. More extensive than the ranch. I count at least 8 buildings, 3 separate shooting ranges, and what looks like a helicopter landing pad. Elena swept her scope across the ranges, noting the target arrangements and firing positions. The ranges are definitely military grade. Multiple distances, various target types, and wait. She adjusted the focus, studying a group of structures that didn't fit the corporate retreat aesthetic. Those buildings on the north side of the complex, they're not guest accommodations. What are you seeing? Barracks. Military-style housing designed for short-term occupation by transient personnel. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she identified more details. And that building with the satellite dishes, that's a communications facility way beyond what a corporate retreat would need. Jack photographed everything she described while mentally cataloging the intelligence value of what they were observing, any signs of current activity. Elena continued her surveillance, looking for the subtle indicators that would suggest ongoing operations. Vehicles in the parking areas, but they're arranged too precisely, like someone positioned them for appearance rather than convenience. She paused, studying a particular area near the communications building. Jack, look at the ground around the barracks. Do you see the wear patterns? Jack adjusted his camera and zoomed in on the area Elena had indicated. The grass showed clear signs of heavy foot traffic and military formation patterns, the kind of wear created by groups of people moving in organized formations rather than the random traffic patterns of corporate guests. Someone's been conducting military-style training here, he confirmed, photographing the evidence. Recent activity, based on the condition of the grass. Elena felt her analytical mind engaging with the tactical problem, pushing aside the anxiety that had plagued her earlier. If they're using this facility for advanced training, they'd need instructors with special operations backgrounds. The kind of people who could teach precision shooting techniques with the stolen targeting systems. Like Viktor Kozlov. Exactly. And if he's here, Elena trailed off as movement caught her attention through the scope. Jack, we have personnel. Through the high-powered optics, Elena watched as a group of 6 individuals emerged from one of the barracks buildings. Even at a distance of over a kilometer, their bearing and movement patterns screamed military training. They moved in a loose formation toward the nearest shooting range, carrying cases that Elena recognized as containing precision rifle systems. Active training in progress, Jack whispered, rapidly photographing the group. Can you identify any of the individuals? Elena studied the figures through her scope, noting details of build, gait, and equipment handling that might help with later identification. 2 women, 4 men. All appear to be in excellent physical condition and comfortable with their equipment. The way they're handling those rifle cases suggests familiarity with precision weapons. As she watched, one of the figures separated from the group and began setting up what appeared to be an observation post overlooking the valley approaches. Elena felt a chill of recognition as she realized what she was seeing. They're posting security, she said urgently. Jack, we need to move, now. But even as she said it, Elena knew they'd been spotted. The figure setting up the observation post had oriented his equipment toward their position and was clearly communicating with the rest of the group via radio. The training exercise had suddenly become a tactical situation. Contact, Jack confirmed, seeing the same thing through his camera. They've made us. Elena began rapidly packing her equipment while her mind shifted into combat mode. Extract route to the helicopter? 2 kilometers northeast, but will be exposed crossing the valley floor. Jack shouldered his pack and began moving toward their planned escape route. Alternative is to go over the ridge and approach the LZ from the north. Over the ridge. It's longer but provides concealment. Elena followed Jack, her body automatically adopting the movement techniques that had kept her alive during her deployment. What's our communication with the helicopter? Quote, Jack checked his radio as they moved through the dense pine forest. Pilot's monitoring, but we're at the edge of our communication range. Behind them, Elena could hear the distant sound of vehicles starting up at the Thunder Mountain facility. Their surveillance mission had been compromised, and now they were being pursued by people with military training and potentially hostile intent. How many pursuit vehicles? Elena asked, pausing to listen to the engine sounds carrying across the valley. At least 2, possibly 3. Jack consulted his GPS and pointed toward a game trail that led up the ridge. This way. It's steep, but should be impassable to vehicles. They climbed rapidly through increasingly difficult terrain, Elena's 3 years of civilian life showing in her reduced cardiovascular fitness. But her tactical awareness remained sharp, and she found herself automatically choosing routes that would provide cover from observation while minimizing their chances of being tracked. Jack, she said as they paused to catch their breath near the ridgeline, if they're willing to pursue us rather than just letting us leave, it means they're conducting operations critical enough to justify exposing themselves. Or they're confident enough in their security to believe they can prevent us from reporting what we've seen. Elena felt the familiar weight of consequence settling on her shoulders. They weren't just gathering intelligence anymore. They were potential witnesses to criminal activity who might need to be silenced. The realization that she was once again in a life-or-death situation should have triggered another panic attack, but instead she found herself thinking with the cold clarity that had made her an effective soldier. We need to reach the helicopter and get this intelligence back to Martinez, she said, checking her equipment and preparing to continue their escape. Whatever they're doing at Thunder Mountain, it's advanced enough that they're willing to risk exposure to protect it. Jack nodded and resumed climbing toward the ridge. Any thoughts on timeline? How close are they to operational deployment? Elena considered what they'd observed. The military-style barracks, the active training, the willingness to pursue potential witnesses. If they're conducting advanced systems training with the stolen equipment, I'd estimate they're within 2 to 3 weeks of deployment. Maybe less. Quote, the implications hung between them as they crested the ridge and began their descent toward the helicopter landing zone. Whatever the Meridian Group and their partners were planning, it was happening soon. And Elena was once again finding herself in the position of being one of the few people with the knowledge and skills necessary to stop it. As they made their way through the wilderness, Elena's hand unconsciously went to the silver fragment at her throat. For 3 years, it had represented her failures and limitations. But now, facing the possibility that her expertise might be the key to preventing a catastrophic attack, she wondered if it might represent something else entirely. The chance to use her skills to protect innocent people rather than carrying the guilt of those she hadn't been able to save. The sound of the helicopter reached them before they could see it, the pilot having repositioned closer to their planned extraction point. Elena felt a surge of relief as the familiar shape of the aircraft came into view, but she also knew that reaching safety was only the beginning of a much larger challenge. They had confirmed that the Meridian Group was conducting advanced training operations with stolen American military technology. They had evidence of involvement by Crimson Solutions, a PMC with a history of conducting illegal operations. And they had established that whatever was being planned was important enough that the conspirators were willing to risk exposure to protect it. But they still didn't know the target, the timeline, or the full scope of what 42 precision rifle systems in the hands of trained killers might be used to accomplish. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them back to Pine Ridge, Elena stared out at the Montana wilderness and wondered if she was ready to fully commit to stopping whatever the Meridian Group was planning, even if it meant returning to the world of violence and moral ambiguity she'd spent 3 years trying to escape. The answer, she realized, might depend on what they discovered at their next reconnaissance site, because if the pattern held, each facility they investigated would reveal more evidence of a plot that was larger and more dangerous than anyone had initially suspected. And Elena was beginning to understand that her expertise in precision shooting and military tactics might be the only thing standing between the conspirators and whatever innocent people they were planning to target. The secure conference room at Pine Ridge buzzed with tension as Elena and Jack presented their reconnaissance findings to Colonel Martinez and her intelligence team. Digital displays showed photographs from both sites, technical analyses of the observed facilities, and preliminary assessments of the threat they were facing. Crimson Solutions changes everything, Martinez said, studying the photograph of the flag they'd documented at Blackwater Ranch. If they're involved, we're not dealing with simple arms trafficking or corporate security training. Elena stood at the front of the room, pointing to details in the surveillance photographs. The facilities at Thunder Mountain show clear evidence of ongoing military training operations. The wear patterns, the equipment arrangements, the security protocols. This isn't recreational shooting or basic marksmanship instruction. How confident are you in your assessment of their timeline? Asked Dr. Sarah Chen, the intelligence analyst who'd been tracking Meridian Group's financial activities. Elena had learned that Sarah was Marcus Chen's older sister, a detail that added personal stakes to an already complex situation. Based on what we observed, I'd estimate they're in the final phases of advanced training, Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady despite the emotional weight of speaking to Marcus's sister. If they're following standard special operations training protocols, they'll want to deploy their personnel within 2 to 3 weeks of completing systems training. Jack added his own observations from the technical intelligence they'd gathered. The communications equipment at Thunder Mountain suggests they're maintaining contact with external command and control elements. This isn't an isolated training operation, it's part of a larger, coordinated plan. Martinez consulted her notes before addressing the room. Our financial intelligence has identified 2 additional facilities that received significant payments from Meridian Group subsidiaries in the past month. One in Wyoming, one in Nevada. Both have the characteristics we've identified as consistent with advanced training operations. Elena felt her chest tighten at the prospect of additional reconnaissance missions. The confrontation at Thunder Mountain had confirmed that they were dealing with professionally trained individuals who wouldn't hesitate to use violence to protect their operations. Are we planning additional surveillance? Quote, "That depends," Martinez said, "on whether you're willing to continue providing technical expertise in the field." Elena looked around the room, noting the expectant faces of the intelligence analysts who were depending on her assessments to understand the threat they were facing. "I need to know more about what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. Are we gathering intelligence for law enforcement action, military intervention, or something else?" Martinez exchanged glances with Jack before responding. "The short answer is that we don't know yet. The jurisdictional issues are complex. These facilities span multiple states, involve international actors, and may be protected by legitimate business operations. We're building a case, but we need more evidence before we can determine the appropriate response." "What about the FBI or other federal agencies?" Elena asked. "Theft of military equipment is clearly within their jurisdiction." "They're aware of our investigation and providing support," Martinez replied carefully. "But the international implications and potential national security threats mean that any operational response may need to come from military or intelligence channels." Elena understood the subtext. They were building towards some form of direct action that would fall outside normal law enforcement procedures. The kind of operation that happened in the shadows and didn't appear in official records. Dr. Chen spoke up from her position at the analysis station. "Ms. Vasquez, based on your military experience, what would be the most effective way to neutralize this threat once we've identified their operational timeline and targets?" Elena felt the room's attention focus on her as she considered the question. "That depends on whether the goal is to recover the stolen equipment, prevent the planned operation, or eliminate the threat permanently. All 3, if possible." Elena moved to the map showing the identified facilities and began thinking through tactical options. Recovery of the equipment would require simultaneous operations at multiple sites. You can't hit one facility and expect the others to remain static. Prevention would require intelligence on their specific targets and timeline. Elimination. She paused, looking at the faces around the room. Elimination would require treating this as a counterterrorism operation with rules of engagement appropriate to the threat level. Martinez nodded slowly. "Which brings us to our next challenge. We need to accelerate our intelligence gathering to identify their targets and timeline before they complete their training and deploy." "How many more reconnaissance missions?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer would stretch her emotional and psychological resources. "At minimum, the Wyoming and Nevada facilities, possibly others as our financial intelligence reveals additional sites." Martinez's expression was sympathetic, but determined. I know this is asking a lot, especially given your medical history. But your expertise may be the key to preventing whatever they're planning. Elena looked at the photographs on the walls, the stolen targeting systems, the surveillance images of Viktor Kozlov and other Meridian Group personnel, the evidence of military-grade training facilities hidden behind legitimate business operations. Somewhere in that collection of intelligence was the information needed to stop a plot that could kill dozens or hundreds of innocent people. I'll continue with the reconnaissance missions, she said finally, but I need support for the psychological aspects. These operations are triggering PTSD responses that could compromise my effectiveness or put the team at risk. Martinez nodded. We have a combat stress specialist on staff, Dr. Rebecca Torres, former Army psychologist with extensive experience supporting special operations personnel. She's cleared for this level of classified material and can provide both therapeutic support and operational psychological assessments. What about tactical support? Jack asked. The incident at Thunder Mountain showed that we're dealing with people who won't hesitate to engage in hostile action. Future reconnaissance missions may require more substantial security arrangements. Agreed, Martinez said. I'm assigning a 4-person security team to support future operations. Former Special Operations personnel with experience in surveillance and reconnaissance missions. Elena felt relieved that they wouldn't be operating alone on future missions, but also concerned about the escalation in operational complexity. Are we still conducting reconnaissance, or are we preparing for direct action? Martinez was quiet for a moment before responding. We're preparing for whatever becomes necessary to protect American lives and national security interests. Quote, the meeting continued for another hour as they planned the next phase of reconnaissance operations, but Elena found her attention drifting to the personal photographs Dr. Chen had placed on her desk, pictures of a young man in Army uniform who looked remarkably like Marcus Chen. The sight of those photos brought back memories of her spotter's enthusiasm and optimism, his plans for the future that had been cut short by an IED in an Afghan valley. After the meeting, Elena approached Dr. Chen at her workstation. I served with your brother in Afghanistan. Sarah Chen looked up from her computer, her eyes immediately focusing on Elena with new interest. You knew Marcus? He was my spotter during our deployment with the 75th Rangers. He was... Elena struggled to find words that would adequately convey Marcus's qualities without reopening wounds that might never heal. He was one of the best soldiers I served with. Professional, dedicated, always looking out for his team. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she managed to smile. He wrote about you in his letters home. Said his sergeant was teaching him to be a real soldier, not just someone who carried a rifle. Elena felt her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her professional composure. He didn't need teaching. He had instincts that would have made him an outstanding NCO if he'd had the chance. He also wrote that you blamed yourself for what happened to him. Elena was quiet for a long moment, remembering the young soldier who died because she hadn't been able to protect him. I was responsible for keeping him safe. I failed. Marcus wouldn't have seen it that way, Sarah said gently. In his last letter, he wrote about how proud he was to serve with soldiers who cared about each other enough to take those kinds of risks. He knew the dangers, and he chose to be there anyway. Elena nodded, though she wasn't sure she'd ever be able to fully accept that perspective. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this operation succeeds. Whatever the Meridian Group is planning, we're going to stop it. Sarah Chen smiled through her tears. Marcus would have expected nothing less from his sergeant. As Elena left the conference room, she felt the weight of obligation settling on her shoulders once again. But this time, it wasn't just about the stolen targeting systems or the potential for mass casualties. It was about honoring the memory of a 19-year-old soldier who died, believing in the importance of their mission and the value of protecting innocent people. The silver fragment pressed against her chest as she walked toward her quarters, where Dr. Torres was waiting to begin the psychological evaluation that would determine whether she was fit for continued operational duty. Elena knew that the conversation would be difficult, forcing her to confront aspects of her PTSD that she'd spent 3 years avoiding. But she also knew that Marcus Chen would have expected her to push through the difficulty and complete the mission, regardless of the personal cost. And maybe, if she was successful in stopping the Meridian Group's plans, the broken piece of her silver star could finally represent something other than failure and loss. Dr. Rebecca Torres had set up her temporary office in a small conference room that felt more like a counseling session than a military evaluation. Elena appreciated the effort to create a non-threatening environment, even though they both knew that the stakes of their conversation went far beyond typical therapeutic outcomes. "Tell me about the panic attack during your first reconnaissance mission," Dr. Torres said, her voice carrying the kind of professional warmth that encouraged honesty without judgment. Elena described the incident at Blackwater Ranch, including her recognition of the Crimson Solutions flag and the flood of memories it had triggered. "It wasn't just the PTSD symptoms. It was the realization that I was back in a world where my decisions could get people killed." "And how did you handle the tactical situation at Thunder Mountain?" "Differently," Elena admitted. "When we were being pursued, I didn't have time for anxiety or panic attacks. My training took over, and I found myself thinking clearly about tactical problems and survival priorities." Dr. Torres made notes while considering Elena's responses. "That's consistent with what we see in many combat veterans with PTSD. The symptoms are often triggered by environmental cues or emotional stress, but they can be temporarily suppressed by immediate survival requirements." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing for operational effectiveness?" "It's complicated," Dr. Torres said. "On one hand, it suggests that you can function effectively under pressure when necessary. On the other hand, the suppression of symptoms during high-stress situations often leads to more severe reactions once the immediate crisis passes." Elena nodded, remembering the emotional crash she'd experienced after returning from Afghanistan. "So I might be able to complete these reconnaissance missions, but the psychological cost could be significant." "Possibly, but there are techniques we can use to help you manage the stress responses and minimize the long-term impact." Dr. Torres leaned forward slightly. "The question is whether you feel that the mission objectives justify the potential risks to your mental health." Elena thought about the stolen targeting systems, the evidence of advanced training operations, and the potential for mass casualties if the Meridian Group's plans succeeded. "How many people could die if we don't stop whatever they're planning? I can't answer that, but I can tell you that carrying the weight of potential victims is just as psychologically damaging as carrying guilt over actual casualties." Elena understood the warning. She was at risk of replacing her guilt over Marcus Chen's death with an equally destructive sense of responsibility for hypothetical future victims. "What do you recommend?" Dr. Torres consulted her notes before responding. "I recommend continued participation in the reconnaissance operations, with several conditions. First, we implement stress management techniques specifically designed for operational environments. Second, we establish clear boundaries around your role and responsibilities. Third, we schedule regular debriefing sessions to address psychological responses before they become overwhelming." "What kind of boundaries?" "You're providing technical expertise and intelligence analysis, not tactical command or operational decision-making. You're not responsible for the ultimate success or failure of the mission, and you're not responsible for protecting every member of the team from every possible risk." Elena felt some of the psychological pressure she'd been carrying begin to ease. "That makes sense intellectually, but emotionally." "Emotionally, you're still the NCO who feels responsible for everyone in her unit. That's both a strength and a vulnerability." Dr. Torres set down her notes and looked directly at Elena. "The key is learning to channel that sense of responsibility into effective action rather than paralyzing guilt." Quote, "They spent the next hour working through specific techniques for managing stress responses in operational environments. Elena learned breathing exercises that could be used while maintaining tactical awareness, mental frameworks for processing traumatic stimuli without becoming overwhelmed, and communication strategies for requesting support when psychological symptoms threatened operational effectiveness." "One more thing," Dr. Torres said as their session concluded. "I want you to consider the possibility that completing this mission successfully might actually help with your PTSD recovery." Elena raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "Right now, your trauma is associated with failure and loss, Marcus Chen's death, your medical discharge, your sense that you couldn't protect the people depending on you. Successfully preventing the Meridian Group's attack could provide a counter-narrative of competence and effectiveness." Elena hadn't considered that perspective. "You think stopping this operation could help me process what happened in Afghanistan?" "I think proving to yourself that your skills and experience can be used to protect innocent people, rather than just carry guilt over those you couldn't save, might be an important step in your healing process." As Elena left the meeting with Dr. Torres, she felt more prepared for the psychological challenges of continued operational involvement. But she also understood that the reconnaissance missions ahead would push her to her limits in ways that went beyond simple tactical risks. The silver fragment at her throat felt heavier as she walked toward the equipment room where Jack was preparing for their next mission. Wyoming was their next target, a facility called Eagle's Nest Training Center that intelligence suggested might be the Meridian Group's primary operational hub. Elena knew that each reconnaissance mission brought them closer to understanding the full scope of the threat they were facing, but she also knew that every new piece of intelligence increased the likelihood that they would eventually need to move beyond surveillance and take direct action to stop whatever the conspirators were planning. And despite Dr. Torres's reassurances about boundaries and responsibilities, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was once again being drawn into a situation where her decisions would determine who lived and who died. Exactly the kind of responsibility she'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. The question was whether she had the courage and psychological resilience to see the mission through to its conclusion, whatever that might require. Eagle's Nest Training Center occupied a remote valley in the Wyoming wilderness, its facilities sprawling across several thousand acres of private land that had once been a working cattle ranch. From their observation position on a ridge 2 kilometers away, Elena could see immediately that this was different from the previous sites they'd reconnoitered. "This isn't just a training facility," she said, studying the complex through her spotting scope. "It's a full-scale operational base." Jack documented what she was describing while the 4-person security team maintained perimeter watch. The addition of Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, Corporal Lisa Jong, Staff Sergeant James Wright, and Specialist Amy Foster had transformed their reconnaissance capability from basic surveillance to professional military intelligence gathering. "I count 18 buildings in the main complex," Elena continued, "including what appears to be an armory, a communications center, and at least 3 separate barracks facilities. This could house and support over 100 personnel." Through her scope, Elena watched as groups of individuals moved between buildings with military precision and discipline. Unlike the smaller training cadres they'd observed at previous sites, Eagle's Nest showed evidence of a major operational presence. "Vehicle park on the north side of the complex," Sergeant Rodriguez reported through his radio. "I count 27 vehicles, including several that appear to be modified for tactical operations." Staff Sergeant Wright, monitoring communications equipment, added his own intelligence. "Heavy radio traffic on military frequencies. They're maintaining contact with multiple external elements." Elena felt her analytical mind processing the tactical picture. This isn't a training site that occasionally hosts operational elements. This is a full-time operational base with training capabilities. "Which means what, exactly?" Jack asked, though Elena suspected he was already reaching the same conclusions. "It means they're not just training mercenaries for future deployment. They have a standing force that's ready for immediate operations." Elena continued her surveillance, noting details that painted an increasingly troubling picture. "And, based on the activity levels and equipment configurations, I'd say they're in final preparation phases for whatever they're planning." Corporal Xiang's voice crackled through their communications system. "Movement in the main complex. Large group assembling near the central building." Elena swung her scope toward the area Zhang had indicated and felt her blood run cold. Approximately 40 individuals were gathering in formation, their bearing and equipment suggesting they were the fully trained personnel who would be deploying with the stolen targeting systems. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "Jack, get your camera on this," she said urgently. "We're looking at what appears to be a final briefing or mission preparation session." Through the high-powered telephoto lens, Jack began documenting the gathering while Elena provided tactical analysis. The individuals appear to be organized into small teams, probably 4-person sniper/spotter pairs with support elements, standard Special Operations Unit organization. As they watched, a figure Elena recognized from intelligence briefings emerged from the central building and began addressing the assembled group. Viktor Kozlov, the former Russian Spetsnaz operator who intelligence believed was heading the Meridian Group's training operations. "Can you hear what he's saying?" Jack asked, adjusting his camera to capture both Kozlov and the reactions of his audience. Elena listened through the directional microphone they'd positioned to pick up conversations at long range. The audio was fragmentary, but she caught enough to understand the nature of the discussion. "He's discussing target assignments and deployment timelines," she reported. Something about final authorization and, quote, achieving maximum psychological impact. Staff Sergeant Wright suddenly looked up from his communications equipment with alarm. We have a problem. They're conducting a communications check that includes security teams positioned around the perimeter of the valley. Elena felt her heart rate spike as she realized the implications. They know someone might be watching. This could be a trap. Sergeant Rodriguez immediately began scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of hostile forces. I don't see any movement on our approaches, but if they have security teams positioned around the valley perimeter, quote, we could be walking into an ambush when we try to extract, Elena finished. The tactical situation had suddenly become much more dangerous than a simple reconnaissance mission. Jack was still photographing the gathering in the main complex when Elena noticed something that made her blood run cold. Several individuals were unpacking cases that contained the distinctive targeting system stolen from the DoD facility. They have the equipment here, she reported. The stolen systems are being distributed to the operational teams. Through her scope, Elena watched as Kozlov demonstrated the capabilities of one of the advanced targeting systems to his assembled personnel. Even at their considerable distance, she could see the precision with which he handled the equipment and the attention his audience paid to his instructions. Final training phase, she murmured, understanding what she was witnessing. They're not just preparing for deployment, they're conducting final rehearsals before launching their actual operation. Specialist Foster, who had been monitoring their communications with Pine Ridge, suddenly spoke up. Base station is reporting unusual activity at the other facilities we've been tracking. Increased communications, vehicle movements, personnel activations. Elena felt pieces of the larger puzzle clicking into place. It's coordinated. All of their facilities are activating simultaneously. Which means their operational timeline has accelerated, Jack said, lowering his camera and beginning to pack their equipment. We need to get this intelligence back to Martinez immediately. But even as they prepared to extract from their observation position, Elena realized they had discovered something that changed the entire nature of their mission. The Meridian Group wasn't planning a single operation using stolen American military technology. They were preparing for multiple, coordinated attacks that would deploy 42 precision rifle teams with capabilities that could threaten targets anywhere in the world. Sergeant Rodriguez, Elena said, her voice taking on the authority of someone who had made life-or-death tactical decisions under pressure, I need you to plot multiple extraction routes. If they have security teams positioned around this valley, our primary route may be compromised. Rodriguez immediately began studying his tactical maps while coordinating with the other team members. Copy that. Right, Foster. I need you to monitor their communications for any indication they've detected our presence. Elena continued her surveillance of the main complex, documenting every detail that might be relevant to understanding the Meridian Group's operational plans. Jack, are you getting clear images of the individuals receiving the targeting systems? Clear enough for facial recognition analysis, Jack confirmed, his camera clicking rapidly as he captured the proceedings below. If intelligence can identify these personnel, we might be able to determine their intended targets based on their backgrounds and specializations. Through her scope, Elena watched as Kozlov concluded his briefing, and the assembled teams began dispersing to various buildings throughout the complex. The disciplined manner in which they moved and the equipment they carried left no doubt that these were experienced military personnel preparing for imminent combat operations. Corporal Zhang, Elena called, what's your assessment of their security posture? Zhang had been observing the perimeter of the complex through her own spotting equipment. Professional, but not paranoid. They have sentries posted at key positions, but they're not conducting active patrols or showing signs of heightened alert status. Elena processed this information, trying to determine whether their surveillance had been detected or if the security measures were simply standard operational procedures. Could be routine security, or they could be confident that their perimeter teams would detect any external threats before they became immediate concerns. Staff Sergeant Wright suddenly looked up from his communications gear with urgency. We have multiple vehicles departing the complex. 3 separate convoys heading in different directions. Elena swung her scope toward the vehicle park and confirmed Wright's observation. Deployment beginning immediately. This isn't final preparation. This is mission launch. The implications hit her like a physical blow. Whatever the Meridian Group had been planning, it was happening now. Their reconnaissance had revealed not preparation for future operations, but the beginning phases of an active attack. Base station, this is Overwatch. Jack spoke into his radio, using their designated call sign for communications with Pine Ridge. "We have immediate tactical intelligence requiring urgent transmission." Martinez's voice crackled through their communications system. "Go ahead, Overwatch." "Multiple operational elements deploying from primary target site. Repeat, deployment is active and immediate. We need to abort reconnaissance and return with intelligence immediately." Elena could hear the tension in Martinez's response. "Understood. Proceed to extraction point Alpha. We'll have additional support standing by." As their team began moving toward their primary extraction route, Elena found herself thinking about the tactical picture they'd uncovered. 42 precision rifle teams with advanced targeting systems deploying simultaneously from multiple locations suggested a coordinated attack plan of staggering scope. "Sergeant Rodriguez," she said as they moved through the forest, "based on what we observed, what's your assessment of their operational capabilities?" Rodriguez, who had experience with special operations planning, considered the question while maintaining tactical awareness of their surroundings. With that many precision shooters and advanced equipment, they could simultaneously target multiple high-value individuals or critical infrastructure elements across a wide geographic area. Elena nodded, her mind racing through possible scenarios. Political assassinations, infrastructure attacks, or terror operations designed to maximize psychological impact. Or all three, Jack added grimly. Coordinated attacks that would create chaos while eliminating specific targets that serve their clients' interests. As they approached their extraction point, Specialist Foster reported additional intelligence from her monitoring of Meridian Group communications. They're coordinating with aviation elements, multiple helicopter flights departing from sites throughout the region. Elena felt the scope of the threat crystallizing in her mind. They're not just deploying ground teams. They're conducting a complex multi-platform operation with air support and communications coordination. The sound of their extraction helicopter reached them before they could see it, but Elena also heard something else, the distinctive whine of multiple aircraft engines from the direction of Eagle's Nest. "Hostile air activity," Wright reported, confirming what Elena was hearing. "Multiple rotary-wing aircraft departing the target site." Elena realized they were witnessing the launch of an operation that had been months in the planning and preparation. Whatever the Meridian Group's ultimate objectives, they were being executed with military precision and overwhelming force. As their helicopter lifted off, carrying them back to Pine Ridge, Elena stared down at the Wyoming wilderness and understood that their reconnaissance mission had revealed something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The stolen targeting systems weren't being prepared for future use. They were being deployed immediately for operations that could reshape the global security landscape. "Jack," she said through their communication system, "we need to contact Martinez immediately. Whatever intelligence we've gathered, it needs to reach decision-makers within hours, not days." Jack nodded, already working his secure communication equipment. "Priority message to Pine Ridge Command. Classification level Alpha. Request immediate conference with all relevant command authorities." Elena looked at the silver fragment hanging around her neck and realized that her 3-year attempt to avoid situations where her decisions affected life and death had come to an abrupt end. Based on what they'd discovered, she was now one of a handful of people who understood the scope and immediacy of the threat facing innocent people around the world. The question was whether the intelligence they'd gathered would be enough to identify and stop the Meridian Group's targets before the attacks could be carried out, and whether Elena was prepared to do whatever might be necessary to prevent the kind of mass casualties that advanced precision rifle systems could inflict in the hands of trained killers with no moral constraints. As the helicopter carried them toward Pine Ridge, Elena knew that the reconnaissance phase of their mission was over. What came next would require direct action, operational planning, and the kind of tactical decisions she'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. But looking at the faces of her team members and thinking about the innocent people who would die if the Meridian Group's operation succeeded, Elena understood that avoiding those decisions was no longer an option. The broken piece of her silver star pressed against her chest as she prepared to once again become the soldier she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The emergency briefing at Pine Ridge began before their helicopter had even finished shutting down. Elena found herself rushed directly from the landing pad to the main conference room, where Martinez had assembled what appeared to be representatives from every major intelligence and law enforcement agency in the federal government. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez announced as Elena and Jack entered the room, "these are the personnel who just completed reconnaissance of what we now believe is the Meridian Group's primary operational base. Elena looked around the room, noting the array of agency badges and security clearances represented: FBI, CIA, NSA, DHS, and several others she didn't recognize. The level of federal attention suggested that their discovery had triggered the highest levels of national security concern. "Ms. Vasquez," said a woman Elena didn't recognize, "I'm Deputy Director Sarah Kim from the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. We need your immediate assessment of what you observed at the Wyoming facility." Elena moved to the front of the room, where large monitors displayed satellite imagery of Eagle's Nest and the other facilities they'd investigated. "Based on our surveillance, I believe we witnessed the beginning phases of a coordinated attack involving approximately 40 precision rifle teams equipped with stolen DoD targeting systems." The room erupted in urgent conversation as the implications of Elena's assessment sank in. Deputy Director Kim raised her hand for silence. "When you say coordinated attack, what kind of operational scope are we discussing?" Elena consulted her notes while organizing her thoughts. Simultaneous deployment from multiple sites, aviation support, advanced communications coordination, and personnel with military special operations backgrounds. This isn't a simple terror attack or criminal operation. It's a precision military action with capabilities that could threaten high-value targets anywhere in the continental United States. A man Elena recognized as CIA introduced himself as Director of Operations Michael Torres. "Any intelligence on specific targets or timeline?" "Timeline appears to be immediate. We observed active deployment during our surveillance. Specific targets remain unknown, but the capabilities we documented would be suitable for long-range assassination, critical infrastructure attack, or coordinated strikes designed to maximize psychological impact." Jack connected his camera equipment to the room's display systems and began showing the photographs they'd captured. "These images show the personnel receiving final briefings and equipment distribution. If we can identify these individuals, we might be able to determine their likely targets based on their backgrounds." Elena watched as the federal officials studied the photographs, their expressions growing increasingly grave as they recognized the professional military bearing of the Meridian Group's personnel. "Ms. Vasquez," Deputy Director Kim said, "in your professional opinion, what would be the most effective way to neutralize this threat?" Elena felt the familiar weight of tactical decision-making settling on her shoulders. "That depends on whether the priority is preventing the attacks, recovering the stolen equipment, or eliminating the threat permanently." "All three," said Director Torres, "but prevention is the immediate priority." Elena moved to the map showing the various Meridian Group facilities. "Simultaneous operations at all confirmed sites. You can't hit one location and expect the others to remain static. They'll disperse or accelerate their timeline if they detect federal action at any single facility." Martinez leaned forward. "What kind of operational requirements would that involve?" Elena considered the tactical challenges of coordinating multiple simultaneous raids across several states. You'd need federal authority to operate across state lines, sufficient personnel to overwhelm each site simultaneously, and intelligence support to track any elements that escape the initial operations. "What about the personnel who have already deployed?" asked an NSA representative Elena hadn't been introduced to. "If some teams are already in position near their targets, then you need to identify those targets immediately and provide protection or interdiction before the attacks can be carried out," Elena replied. "With the targeting systems they've stolen, these teams could engage targets from ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. Traditional security perimeters won't be sufficient." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of what Elena was describing. 42 precision rifle teams with advanced targeting capabilities could simultaneously threaten dozens of high-value targets across the country, creating a security nightmare that would strain federal resources beyond their limits. Director Torres spoke first. "We need to accelerate identification of their likely targets. CIA will coordinate with NSA and FBI to analyze intelligence on Meridian Group's clients and financial backers." Deputy Director Kim nodded. "FBI will coordinate with state and local law enforcement to enhance security around potential high-value targets. But without specific intelligence, we're essentially providing protection for everyone who might be important enough to warrant this level of attack." Elena understood the impossible scope of the challenge they were facing. "There might be another approach," she said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "Go ahead," Martinez encouraged. "Instead of trying to protect every possible target, we focus on disrupting their command and control capabilities." Elena pointed to the communications equipment they'd observed at Eagle's Nest. "These operations require coordination between multiple teams and central command elements. If we can identify and neutralize their coordination capabilities, we might be able to prevent coordinated attacks, even if we can't locate every individual team. Director Torres looked interested. What would that require? Elena felt herself slipping back into the tactical mindset that had once made her an effective soldier. Technical intelligence to identify their communication networks, signal intelligence to locate their command elements, and rapid response capabilities to neutralize those command elements before they can execute their attack plan. How quickly could something like that be implemented? Deputy Director Kim asked. Elena looked around the room at the assembled federal officials and realized that she was essentially briefing them on a counterterrorism operation that would require resources and authorities at the highest levels of government. If you have the intelligence capabilities to identify their communication networks within 12 hours and the operational authorities to conduct direct action against their command elements, you might be able to disrupt their coordination before the attacks can be executed. Martinez made notes while considering Elena's proposal. What kind of operational support would be required? Elena hesitated, knowing that her next words would likely draw her deeper into operational involvement than she'd intended. Someone with understanding of precision rifle tactics to help identify their command elements and predict their operational patterns. Technical expertise to assess their equipment capabilities. And tactical consultation on the most effective methods of disruption. She could see in Martinez's expression that the colonel understood exactly what Elena was volunteering for. Direct involvement in a federal counterterrorism operation that would put her back in the kind of high-stakes tactical environment she'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. Ms. Vasquez, Director Torres said, would you be willing to provide that kind of operational support? Elena looked around the room at the faces of federal officials who were depending on her expertise to prevent what could be one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in American history. She thought about Marcus Chen and the promise she'd made at his funeral to never again put herself in situations where her decisions could get people killed. But she also thought about the innocent people who would die if the Meridian Group's attack succeeded, and the advanced American military technology that was being used to threaten the country that had created it. Yes, she said finally, I'll provide whatever support is necessary to stop these attacks. As the meeting continued with discussions of operational authorities and resource allocation, Elena realized that she had just committed herself to the most dangerous and consequential mission of her military career. The reconnaissance phase was over, and what came next would require her to once again become the precision shooter and tactical decision-maker she'd tried so hard to leave behind. The silver fragment at her throat felt heavier as she prepared to return to a world where split-second decisions determined who lived and who died, and where the price of failure would be measured in innocent lives lost to weapons that should have been protecting American interests rather than threatening them. We're approaching the climactic moments of this epic tale, and the tension is at its peak. Creating stories of this scope and detail requires not just writing talent, but careful plotting, character development, and attention to every narrative thread. We've journeyed through nearly 40,000 words together, and I hope every moment has kept you engaged. If this story has drawn you in and kept you listening, please show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Share this epic with anyone who loves immersive storytelling, and hit that notification bell for more incredible adventures. Now, let's witness how everything comes together in these final crucial moments. The Joint Task Force Operations Center had been established in a secure facility outside Washington, D.C., bringing together the most advanced intelligence and tactical capabilities of the federal government. Elena found herself at the center of an operation involving hundreds of personnel and resources she'd only dreamed of during her military service. Signal intelligence has identified 17 active communication nodes consistent with Meridian Group operations, reported NSA analyst Dr. James Carter, pointing to locations marked on a digital map covering the entire continental United States. They're using encrypted military frequencies with sophisticated anti-jamming capabilities. Elena studied the distribution of the communication nodes, noting patterns that suggested tactical thinking behind their placement. The spacing suggests they're coordinating operations across multiple time zones. Whatever they're planning, it's designed to create maximum disruption across the entire country. FBI Deputy Director Kim consulted intelligence reports from field offices across the nation. We've identified potential targets in New York, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Chicago, and several smaller cities. High-value individuals, critical infrastructure, and symbolic targets that would maximize psychological impact. Elena felt her chest tighten as she realized the scope of the threat they were facing. 42 teams could simultaneously target over 100 individuals or facilities. Even if we prevent most of the attacks, the psychological impact of coordinated strikes could destabilize the entire country. CIA Director Torres added his own intelligence to the tactical picture. Financial analysis suggests the Meridian Group has been contracted by a consortium of foreign governments and criminal organizations. The goal appears to be destabilization of American political and economic systems rather than simple terrorism. Elena understood the implications. They weren't dealing with ideologically motivated terrorists, but with professional killers hired to conduct strategic attacks designed to weaken American influence and capabilities. "What's our timeline for federal response?" she asked Martinez, who was coordinating between the various agencies. Martinez consulted her operational notes. 12 hours until we can launch coordinated raids on all identified Meridian Group facilities. But intelligence suggests their deployed teams may begin operations within 6 hours. Elena felt the familiar pressure of tactical decision-making under impossible time constraints. We need to accelerate disruption of their command and control capabilities. If we can't prevent the attacks through direct action, we need to prevent coordination between the teams. Dr. Carter looked up from his signal intelligence equipment. We've identified what appears to be their primary command node, a mobile communications platform that's been moving between locations in Virginia. Elena moved to the map, studying the movement patterns of the command node. Mobile platform suggests they anticipated federal response and are maintaining operational security through constant movement. But it also means they have to maintain communication with their deployed teams, which creates vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? Director Torres asked. Elena thought through the technical challenges of coordinating complex operations while maintaining operational security. They have to balance communication security with operational coordination. The more secure their communications, the more difficult it becomes to coordinate real-time tactical adjustments. Martinez nodded, understanding Elena's tactical analysis. If we can force them to choose between security and coordination, we might be able to disrupt their operations even if we can't locate all their teams. Elena felt pieces of a tactical solution beginning to form in her mind. We need to create a situation where their command element has to communicate with their teams using less secure methods, something that forces them to reveal their positions or abort their operations. What did you have in mind? Deputy Director Kim asked. Elena studied the intelligence displays, looking for patterns that might reveal the Meridian Group's operational priorities. We create false intelligence suggesting that federal forces have identified and are moving to intercept specific teams. Their command element will have to communicate with those teams to either extract them or redirect them to alternate targets. Director Torres looked interested. Using their own operational security against them. Exactly, we force them to make tactical communications that reveal their positions and operational plans. Elena pointed to locations on the map where intelligence suggested Meridian Group teams might be positioned. But it has to be convincing enough that they believe the threat is real. Martinez began making notes about operational requirements. What would we need to implement this kind of deception operation? Elena considered the tactical challenges involved. Real federal responses to the false intelligence. If we say we're moving to intercept a team at a specific location, we actually have to deploy federal assets to that location. Otherwise, they'll recognize the deception and adapt their communications accordingly. How many false responses? Deputy Director Kim asked. Elena studied the map, calculating the resources required to create convincing deception operations. At least 6, possibly 8 different locations. Enough to create the impression that we have comprehensive intelligence on their team positions. Director Torres made rapid calculations about resource requirements. That would require significant federal assets, tactical teams, surveillance aircraft, communications equipment. But it might be our only option for forcing them to reveal their actual positions and operational timeline, Elena replied. The alternative is waiting for the attacks to begin and trying to respond reactively. Martinez consulted with her operational staff before responding. We can provide the resources for a coordinated deception operation, but we'll need precise intelligence on where to focus our false responses. Elena looked around the operations center, noting the tension on every face as federal officials contemplated the most complex counterterrorism operation in American history. I need to study their communication patterns and operational procedures. Give me 2 hours with the signal intelligence data, and I can identify the most likely locations for deception operations. As Elena immersed herself in the technical details of the Meridian Group's operational communications, she found herself thinking about the civilian scope technician she'd been just days earlier. That quiet life of precision optics and simple routine seemed like a different world now that she was helping plan federal counterterrorism operations. But she also realized that her unique combination of military experience and technical expertise was exactly what was needed to understand how the Meridian Group's operations would unfold. She wasn't just Elena Vasquez, former soldier with PTSD. She was one of the few people who could think like both the attackers and the defenders. Dr. Carter approached her workstation with additional intelligence. We've intercepted fragmentary communications that suggest some of their teams are already in position near their targets. Whatever deception operation we implement, it needs to happen within the next few hours. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of urgency pressing on her tactical analysis. Have we identified any of their specific targets? Partial intelligence suggests high-value political figures, critical infrastructure nodes, and symbolic targets in major metropolitan areas. Carter consulted his notes, but nothing specific enough to provide targeted protection. Elena understood the impossible scope of providing security for every potential target, which brings us back to disrupting their coordination capabilities. If we can prevent them from executing coordinated attacks, we turn 42 precision teams into individual threats that can be addressed separately. As she worked through the signal intelligence data, Elena began to see patterns in the Meridian Group's communications that suggested their operational timeline and tactical priorities. But she also realized that implementing the deception operation would require her to provide tactical consultation in real time as federal forces deployed to create false intelligence. Martinez, she called. I'm going to need to coordinate directly with field commanders implementing the deception operations. Someone needs to be available to adjust the tactical picture, based on how the Meridian Group responds to our false intelligence. Martinez looked up from her coordination with federal agency representatives. Are you volunteering for operational command responsibilities? Elena felt her chest tighten at the prospect of making tactical decisions that would directly affect the safety of federal agents and the success of the counterterrorism operation. I'm volunteering to provide whatever tactical support is necessary to make this work. As the Operations Center prepared to launch the most complex deception operation in counterterrorism history, Elena realized that she was once again in the position she'd tried so hard to avoid, making decisions that would determine whether innocent people lived or died. But looking at the intelligence displays showing the scope of the Meridian Group's threat, she understood that avoiding those decisions would guarantee that the innocent people she was trying to protect would become casualties of an attack she might have been able to prevent. The silver fragment pressed against her chest as she prepared to coordinate federal tactical operations against an enemy that was using American military technology to threaten American lives. For 3 years, she'd carried that broken piece of metal as a reminder of her failures and limitations. Now, as she prepared to pit her expertise against professionally trained killers, armed with the most advanced targeting systems ever created, Elena wondered if the fragment might finally represent something else. The possibility of redemption through service, even when that service required confronting the darkest aspects of her own capabilities. The deception operation launched at 0300 hours, with coordinated federal responses to 8 locations where intelligence suggested Meridian Group teams might be positioned. Elena found herself at the Tactical Nerve Center, coordinating between FBI tactical teams, NSA signal intelligence, and CIA operational analysts as they attempted to force the enemy into revealing their true positions. Team Alpha reporting movement to Position 1 crackled through the communications system as FBI tactical units deployed to the first deception site in Virginia. Elena monitored the Meridian Group's communication frequencies while analyzing their responses to the federal deployment. No reaction on their primary frequencies. Either they're not monitoring that location, or they're maintaining communication discipline. Dr. Carter worked his signal intelligence equipment while coordinating with NSA stations across the country. Increased activity on their command frequency. Someone's asking for status updates from field teams. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the tactical pattern. They're conducting a communication check. Our deployment has made them nervous, but they're not sure if it's directed at them or just routine federal activity. Martinez coordinated between the various federal agencies while monitoring Elena's tactical analysis. Do we need to escalate the deception? Elena studied the communication patterns, looking for signs that the Meridian Group was beginning to react to their false intelligence. Not yet. Let them complete their communication check. If they believe the threat is real, they'll start relocating teams or adjusting operational timelines. Team Bravo in position at Location 3 reported another FBI tactical commander. No contact with potential hostiles. Elena continued monitoring enemy communications while trying to identify patterns that would reveal their operational thinking. Dr. Carter, are you seeing any correlation between our deployments and increases in their communication activity? Carter analyzed the data streams from multiple intelligence sources. Marginal increase in activity corresponding to our deployments at locations 1 and 3, minimal response to our other positions. Elena felt pieces of the tactical puzzle beginning to form. They have intelligence on our activities, but it's not comprehensive. They know something is happening, but they're not sure what or how much we know about their positions. Which means the deception is working, Martinez observed. Partially. But we need them to commit to tactical communications that reveal their actual positions. Elena considered their options while monitoring the ongoing federal deployments. We need to escalate the threat enough that they feel compelled to communicate with their teams. Director Torres, who had been coordinating with CIA operational elements, looked up from his communication station. What kind of escalation? Elena thought through the tactical psychology involved in forcing an enemy to reveal their positions. We need to make them believe that we're about to discover one of their actual teams. Something that threatens their operational security enough that they have to warn their people. False intelligence suggesting we've identified specific individuals or equipment? Deputy Director Kim asked. Better than that. We need to make them think we're about to intercept one of their teams during final approach to a target. Elena moved to the tactical display showing federal asset positions. If they believe one of their teams is about to be compromised, they'll have to communicate tactical adjustments to prevent mission failure. Martinez began coordinating with field commanders while considering Elena's recommendation. Which team do we target for this level of deception? Elena studied the intelligence displays, looking for Meridian Group teams that might be most vulnerable to federal interdiction. Location 4. Our intelligence suggests they might have a team positioned near critical infrastructure in the Washington, D.C. area. If we can make them believe that team is about to be discovered, they'll have to communicate with the team to either extract them or redirect them to an alternate target. Director Torres finished. Elena nodded. And either response will require tactical communications that reveal both the team's position and the command element's capabilities. Dr. Carter began preparing enhanced signal intelligence capabilities to intercept the communications Elena's plan would hopefully generate. If they communicate tactical adjustments, we should be able to identify both the team positions and their command coordination methods. Elena felt the familiar clarity that came from tactical problem-solving under pressure. Team Charlie needs to deploy to Location 4 with enhanced surveillance capabilities. Make it look like we're conducting detailed reconnaissance preparatory to tactical interdiction. As federal assets repositioned to create the enhanced deception, Elena monitored enemy communications for signs that the Meridian Group was reacting to the increased threat. The next few minutes would determine whether their tactical gambit would force the enemy to reveal information crucial to preventing their attacks. Enhanced surveillance in position at Location 4, reported the FBI tactical commander, deploying observation teams and communications intercept equipment. Elena watched her displays, waiting for the Meridian Group's command element to recognize the threat to their operational security. Come on, she whispered. You know we're getting close. You have to warn your people. Dr. Carter suddenly looked up from his equipment with excitement. Increased activity on their command frequency. Someone's transmitting tactical updates to multiple field elements. Elena felt adrenaline surge through her system as the deception operation began producing the intelligence they needed. Are you getting location data on the receiving stations? Partial triangulation on at least 6 different receiving stations, Carter confirmed. And the command element just transmitted what appears to be new target assignments. Elena realized they had achieved exactly what they'd hoped for, forcing the Meridian Group to reveal their positions and operational plans through tactical communications. Martinez, we need to get this intelligence to field commanders immediately. If they're adjusting target assignments, some of their teams may be moving to new positions. As intelligence flowed from the signal intercepts to federal tactical units across the country, Elena understood that they had successfully disrupted the Meridian Group's operational coordination. But she also knew that forcing them to communicate had accelerated their timeline. They would now move to execute their attacks before federal forces could fully respond to the intelligence they'd gathered. All stations, this is command, Martinez announced to the federal tactical teams deployed across multiple states. Intelligence indicates hostile elements are adjusting positions and accelerating operational timeline. All teams prepare for immediate tactical response. Elena looked around the operations center and realized that they had succeeded in turning the Meridian Group's operational security against them. But the cost of that success was that they now faced 42 precision rifle teams that were moving to execute attacks across the country within hours rather than days. The question was whether the intelligence they'd gathered would be sufficient to prevent the attacks, or whether they had simply forced the enemy to accelerate a timeline that would result in casualties they were no longer able to prevent. The silver fragment at her throat felt like a weight as Elena prepared to coordinate the final phase of what had become the most complex counterterrorism operation in American history. In a few hours, she would know whether her tactical decisions had saved innocent lives or simply rearranged the circumstances under which those lives would be lost. The operations center erupted into controlled chaos as intelligence from the successful deception operation began revealing the scope and complexity of the Meridian Group's attack plan. Elena found herself at the center of a coordination effort involving federal tactical teams in 12 states, intelligence analysts processing real-time data from dozens of sources, and command elements making split-second decisions that would determine the fate of hundreds of potential targets. Signal intelligence confirms 18 active Meridian Group teams moving to final positions, Dr. Carter reported, his equipment displaying a map of the United States marked with red indicators showing hostile movement. Estimated time to target engagement ranges from 2 to 6 hours. Elena studied the tactical picture while coordinating with field commanders who were deploying federal assets to intercept the identified teams. What's our response capability? How many teams can we realistically intercept before they reach their targets? Martinez consulted deployment status reports from FBI, Secret Service, and military special operations elements. We have tactical response teams moving to intercept 8 confirmed hostile positions. The others are either too remote for immediate response or positioned near targets where engagement could endanger civilians. Elena felt the familiar weight of tactical decision-making settling on her shoulders. Then we need to focus on preventing the attacks we can stop, while minimizing casualties from those we can't intercept in time. Director Torres coordinated with CIA elements while analyzing intelligence on the Meridian Group's ultimate objectives. Financial intelligence suggests their primary goal is maximum psychological impact rather than specific target elimination. They want to demonstrate that American security is inadequate to protect high-value targets. Elena understood the implications. The attackers would prioritize targets and timing that created the greatest media impact and public fear, rather than focusing solely on military or political objectives. Dr. Carter, she called. Are we still intercepting tactical communications from their command element? Carter monitored multiple signal intelligence sources while coordinating with NSA facilities across the country. Intermittent communications, but they've adapted to more secure protocols. We're getting partial intelligence, but not complete tactical pictures. Elena realized they were reaching the limits of what could be accomplished through signal intelligence and deception operations. Then we need to shift to direct action. Federal tactical teams need to begin interdiction operations against confirmed hostile positions. Deputy Director Kim coordinated with FBI field offices while receiving status reports from tactical teams across the country. Teams Alpha through Delta report ready for immediate tactical response. Teams Echo through Hotel are still moving to intercept positions. Elena looked at the tactical displays showing the positions of federal response teams relative to identified Meridian Group elements. Coordinated engagement in 30 minutes. All teams hit their targets simultaneously to prevent warning between hostile elements. As federal tactical teams prepared for what would be the largest coordinated counterterrorism operation in American history, Elena found herself providing real-time tactical consultation to field commanders who were preparing to engage professionally trained killers armed with advanced precision rifle systems. Team Alpha, this is Command, she spoke into the tactical communications system. Your target element is equipped with stolen DoD targeting systems, with effective ranges exceeding 2 kilometers. Maintain standoff distance and use indirect approach routes. The FBI tactical commander responded immediately, copy Command, adjusting approach to minimize exposure to long-range engagement. Elena continued coordinating between multiple tactical teams while analyzing intelligence updates that revealed additional details about the Meridian Group's operational plans. Team Bravo, intelligence suggests your target element may be positioned for overlapping fields of fire with Team Charlie's objective. Coordinate your approaches to prevent crossfire situations. Martinez monitored the overall tactical situation while coordinating between federal agencies and military support elements. Elena, we're getting reports of hostile movement near the Washington, D.C. area. Multiple teams may be converging on high-value targets in the capital region. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she realized that the Meridian Group's primary objective might be a coordinated attack on the federal government itself. How many teams in the D.C. area? At least 4, possibly 6. They appear to be positioning for simultaneous engagements of targets throughout the metropolitan area. Elena studied the tactical picture, understanding that a coordinated attack on the nation's capital would achieve exactly the kind of psychological impact the Meridian Group's clients were seeking. We need to prioritize federal response to the D.C. area. If they succeed in coordinating attacks there, the psychological impact would be devastating, Director Torres finished. Even if we prevent attacks in other locations, successful strikes in Washington would achieve their strategic objectives. Elena made a tactical decision that she knew would increase risks to federal personnel but might be essential to preventing catastrophic attacks on the government. Martinez, I need to coordinate directly with the D.C. area tactical teams. The complexity of the threat requires real-time tactical consultation. Martinez looked up from her coordination activities with concern. That would require you to deploy to the D.C. Area Operations Center. Are you prepared for that level of operational involvement? Elena thought about Dr. Torres's warnings about the psychological risks of returning to high-stress tactical environments, but she also understood that her expertise might be the difference between successfully preventing the attacks and watching the Meridian Group achieve their strategic objectives. I'm prepared to do whatever is necessary to stop these attacks, she said finally. As arrangements were made for Elena's deployment to the Washington, D.C. Tactical Operations Center, she realized that she was about to return to the kind of high-stakes operational environment she'd spent 3 years trying to avoid. But looking at the intelligence displays showing the scope of the threat to innocent lives, she understood that avoiding that responsibility was no longer an option. Team Charlie reports contact with hostile element, crackled through the communications system. Engaging now. Elena monitored the tactical communications as the first of the coordinated interdiction operations began. Federal agents were engaging professionally trained killers armed with the most advanced targeting systems ever created, and the outcome would determine whether the largest terrorist attack in American history could be prevented. Team Charlie reports successful interdiction, came the follow-up communication. 2 hostile personnel in custody, advanced targeting system recovered. Elena felt a surge of relief as the first success was reported, but she also knew that they had engaged less than 5% of the total threat. 39 precision rifle teams were still moving toward their targets, and the window for federal interdiction was rapidly closing. All teams, this is Command, Martinez announced. First engagement successful. Continue with coordinated interdiction operations. Elena gathered her equipment and prepared for deployment to the D.C. Operations Center, where she would coordinate the most critical phase of the counterterrorism operation. In a few hours, she would either help prevent the most devastating terrorist attack in American history, or watch as her tactical decisions proved insufficient to protect the innocent lives depending on her expertise. The silver fragment pressed against her chest as she prepared to once again become the soldier she'd tried so hard to leave behind. But this time, instead of carrying the weight of failure and loss, she was carrying the possibility of redemption through service, even if that service required confronting the darkest aspects of warfare in defense of the country she'd sworn to protect. The helicopter carrying Elena to the D.C. Operations Center flew through the pre-dawn darkness over a city that was completely unaware of the threat converging on its most critical targets. Through the aircraft's windows, she could see the familiar landmarks of the nation's capital, the Washington Monument, the Capitol Building, the White House, all of which might be under attack within hours. ETA to Tactical Operations Center, 3 minutes, the pilot announced through the intercom. Elena reviewed the latest intelligence updates on her secure tablet while preparing for what she knew would be the most challenging tactical coordination of her career. The Meridian Group had positioned at least 6 precision rifle teams around the D.C. metropolitan area, with targeting capabilities that could threaten high-value individuals and critical infrastructure from distances that made traditional security perimeters inadequate. "Command, this is Overwatch 2, she spoke into her communication system using her new call sign for the D.C. operations. "Requesting status update on hostile positions in the capital region." Martinez's voice crackled through the secure communications. 6 confirmed hostile elements positioned throughout the D.C. area. Federal tactical teams are moving to intercept, but the urban environment is complicating approach routes and engagement options. Elena understood the tactical challenges involved in conducting counterterrorism operations in a densely populated metropolitan area where civilian casualties had to be minimized while engaging professionally trained killers with advanced weapon systems. The helicopter touched down at a facility Elena recognized as a federal law enforcement training center that had been converted into a tactical operations hub. As she disembarked, she was met by Special Agent in Charge Patricia Williams, who was coordinating FBI tactical response in the D.C. area. "Ms. Vasquez," Williams said, extending her hand, "we need your expertise on precision rifle tactics immediately. We have federal agents preparing to engage hostiles armed with targeting systems none of us have ever seen before." Elena followed Williams into the operations center, where she found a situation that was both familiar and terrifying. Tactical displays showed the positions of Meridian Group teams throughout the Washington area, federal response units moving to intercept them, and potential targets that included some of the most important political figures and critical infrastructure in the country. "What's our current tactical picture?" Elena asked, studying the displays while trying to understand the scope of the threat they were facing. Williams pointed to various locations on the tactical map. Team 1 is positioned near the Capitol building, with clear sight lines to multiple government facilities. Team 2 has taken position overlooking the White House complex. Teams 3 and 4 appear to be targeting critical infrastructure, power grid, and communications facilities. Elena felt her blood run cold as she realized the scope of the coordinated attack. They're not just targeting individuals, they're planning to simultaneously attack government leadership and critical infrastructure to maximize disruption and psychological impact. "Teams 5 and 6? Elena asked, noting additional markers on the tactical display. Williams consulted her intelligence reports. "Positioned near Reagan National Airport and the Pentagon. If they succeed in coordinating attacks on all these targets." Elena understood the implications without Williams having to finish the sentence. Simultaneous precision rifle attacks on the White House, Capitol building, Pentagon, and critical infrastructure would create the kind of national crisis that could destabilize the entire government. "What's our federal response capability?" Elena asked, though she suspected the answer wouldn't be encouraging. Williams coordinated with multiple federal agencies while providing Elena with tactical status updates. "We have 6 tactical teams moving to intercept the 6 identified hostile positions. But the urban environment and civilian population density are limiting our engagement options." Elena studied the tactical picture, noting the challenges that urban counterterrorism operations presented. The hostiles chose their positions specifically to complicate federal response. They're using civilian areas as shields while maintaining clear fields of fire to their targets. Quote, "Can we prevent the attacks?" Williams asked directly. Elena considered the tactical situation, analyzing the capabilities of both the federal response teams and the Meridian Group elements they were preparing to engage. "If we can coordinate simultaneous interdiction of all 6 teams, yes. But if any of them detect federal movement and communicate warnings to the others, they'll accelerate their timeline and begin attacks immediately," Williams finished. Elena nodded, "which means we have one chance to get this right. All 6 teams have to be engaged simultaneously, and all 6 engagements have to be successful." As Elena prepared to coordinate the most critical tactical operation of her life, she realized that the skills and experience that had once made her an effective soldier were now the only things standing between the Meridian Group and a coordinated attack that could reshape American society. "All tactical teams, this is Overwatch 2, she announced into the communication system. "Prepare for coordinated engagement of all hostile elements in T-30 minutes. This is a simultaneous operation. No team engages until all teams are in position and ready." Elena looked around the operations center and understood that the next 30 minutes would determine whether her expertise had been sufficient to prevent the most devastating terrorist attack in American history, or whether the broken piece of her silver star would once again represent failure and loss on an unimaginable scale. But as she began coordinating between federal tactical teams preparing to engage professionally trained killers, Elena found herself thinking not about the possibility of failure, but about the innocent lives she was fighting to protect and the country she'd sworn to defend. The silver fragment at her throat no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a reminder of why she'd become a soldier in the first place, and why some battles were worth fighting regardless of the personal cost. All teams report ready for coordinated engagement, Special Agent Williams announced as federal tactical units positioned themselves around the 6 Meridian Group teams threatening the nation's capital. Elena monitored communications from all 6 federal teams while analyzing real-time intelligence updates that revealed the scope and sophistication of the attack they were preparing to prevent. Team Alpha, confirm your target element's position relative to civilian areas. Quote, Alpha confirms hostile position in abandoned warehouse, minimal civilian exposure, came the immediate response. Elena continued coordinating between the teams while maintaining awareness of the tactical challenges each faced. Team Bravo, status on your approach to the White House area target? Bravo in position. Hostile element confirmed in high-rise building with clear sightlines to target area. Ready for engagement. As Elena coordinated the most complex counterterrorism operation in American history, she found herself thinking with the tactical clarity that had once made her an effective soldier. The psychological symptoms that had plagued her for 3 years seemed to fade, as she focused on the immediate challenge of protecting innocent lives. Dr. Carter, this is Overwatch 2, she called to the NSA signal intelligence specialist. Any indication that hostile elements are aware of federal tactical movements? Carter's voice crackled through the secure communications. Minimal communication activity on their frequencies. If they've detected federal presence, they're maintaining communication discipline. Elena understood that the Meridian Group's operational security discipline was both an advantage and a vulnerability. It prevented them from coordinating responses to federal interdiction, but it also meant they might not realize the scope of the threat they were facing until it was too late. All teams, this is Overwatch 2, she announced. Intelligence suggests hostile elements are not aware of federal tactical presence. Maintain operational security and prepare for simultaneous engagement in T-10 minutes. Special Agent Williams coordinated with federal agencies throughout the D.C. area while monitoring the tactical situation. Elena, we're getting reports of unusual activity near several potential targets. Security details are reporting unidentified personnel conducting surveillance. Elena felt her pulse quicken as she realized the implications. The hostile elements are conducting final reconnaissance before beginning their attacks. We're running out of time. How much time? Williams asked. Elena studied the tactical picture, considering the operational timeline required for precision rifle attacks on multiple targets. If they're conducting final reconnaissance, they'll begin attacks within the next hour, possibly sooner if they detect federal tactical movements. Then we engage now, Williams decided. All teams, this is DC. Command. Execute coordinated engagement immediately. Elena monitored communications from all 6 tactical teams as federal agents moved to engage the Meridian Group elements positioned throughout the capital region. Team Alpha engaging hostile position 1. Team Bravo moving to engage position 2. Team Charlie in contact with hostile element position 3. As federal tactical teams engaged professionally trained killers armed with advanced targeting systems, Elena found herself coordinating real-time tactical adjustments while analyzing intelligence that revealed the full scope of what they were preventing. Team Alpha reports successful engagement, 2 hostile personnel in custody, advanced targeting system secured. Elena felt a surge of relief as the first success was reported, but she knew that 5 precision rifle teams were still potentially capable of conducting devastating attacks on critical targets. Team Bravo reports contact, hostile element engaging federal personnel with precision rifle fire. Elena's chest tightened as she realized that one of the Meridian Group teams had detected the federal interdiction and was fighting back with the advanced targeting systems they'd been preparing to use against civilian targets. Team Bravo, this is Overwatch 2, report status and casualty assessment. Bravo reports 2 federal agents wounded but hostile position is contained. Requesting tactical support for final assault. Elena coordinated with additional federal assets while analyzing the tactical situation at each engagement site. Team Delta, are you in position to provide tactical support to Team Bravo? Delta confirms ready to provide support, moving to assist Bravo with hostile engagement. As the coordinated counterterrorism operation continued, Elena monitored intelligence updates that revealed the scope of what they were preventing. Dr. Carter, are we intercepting any communications from hostile command elements? Carter analyzed signal intelligence from multiple sources while coordinating with NSA facilities. Minimal communication activity, but what we're intercepting suggests their command element is aware that federal operations are underway. Elena understood the implications. The Meridian Group's command structure would be analyzing the federal response and potentially ordering accelerated attacks by any teams that hadn't yet been interdicted. All teams, this is Overwatch 2, she announced. Intelligence suggests hostile command elements are aware of federal operations. Any teams that haven't yet engaged their targets may accelerate attack timelines. Team Charlie reports successful interdiction. Hostile personnel in custody, targeting system secured. Team Echo engaging hostile position 5. Heavy resistance from professionally trained personnel. Elena monitored the tactical communications while coordinating federal response to the most complex counterterrorism challenge in American history. 3 teams had been successfully interdicted, but 3 others were still potentially capable of conducting attacks that could kill dozens of people and destabilize the government. Team Foxtrot reports movement at hostile position 6. Target element appears to be preparing for immediate attack on Pentagon area. Elena felt adrenaline surge through her system as she realized that one of the Meridian Group teams was accelerating their timeline in response to the federal interdiction operations. Team Foxtrot, you are authorized for immediate tactical engagement. Do not allow hostile element to complete attack preparation. Foxtrot engaging immediately. As Elena coordinated the final phase of the counterterrorism operation, she realized that her expertise in precision rifle tactics and military operations had been essential to preventing what could have been the most devastating terrorist attack in American history. Team Bravo reports successful completion of engagement, hostile personnel neutralized, targeting system secured. Team Echo reports successful interdiction, 2 hostile personnel in custody. Team Foxtrot reports engagement complete. Hostile attack on Pentagon prevented, advanced targeting system recovered. Elena looked around the operations center as reports of successful federal interdiction came in from all 6 tactical teams. They had prevented coordinated precision rifle attacks on the White House, Capitol Building, Pentagon, and critical infrastructure throughout the Washington, D.C. area. All teams, this is D.C. Command, Special Agent Williams announced, coordinated interdiction operations successful. All hostile elements have been neutralized or taken into custody. Elena felt a wave of relief and exhaustion as she realized that they had successfully prevented the Meridian Group's coordinated attack on the nation's capital. But she also knew that federal operations were continuing at other locations across the country, where additional Meridian Group teams had been identified. Martinez, this is Overwatch 2, she called to the overall command element. DC area operation successful. What's the status of federal interdiction at other locations? Martinez's voice carried the satisfaction of successful mission completion. Coordinated federal operations have successfully interdicted 34 of the 42 identified hostile elements. The remaining 8 teams have been dispersed or neutralized through ongoing tactical operations. Elena understood that they had achieved something unprecedented in counterterrorism operations. The successful prevention of a coordinated attack involving dozens of precision rifle teams armed with advanced military targeting systems. Dr. Carter, any intelligence on the Meridian Group's command structure? Elena asked. Carter's analysis of signal intelligence had revealed additional details about the scope of the operation they prevented. Command element appears to have been operating from the mobile platform we identified in Virginia. Federal tactical teams are moving to intercept that location now. Elena realized that the successful federal interdiction of the Meridian Group's operational teams was only part of the mission. They still needed to neutralize the command structure that had coordinated the attack and recover any additional stolen equipment. Martinez, do you need tactical consultation for the command element interdiction? She asked. Martinez's response revealed the scope of federal resources being deployed for the final phase of the operation. Military special operations elements are handling the command interdiction. Your tactical consultation has been essential to the success of this operation, but the immediate threat has been neutralized. Elena looked around the D.C. Operations Center and realized that her role in the counterterrorism operation was complete. Federal tactical teams had successfully prevented coordinated precision rifle attacks throughout the country, recovered the stolen targeting systems, and were in the process of neutralizing the command structure that had planned the attacks. Special Agent Williams, she said, I believe my tactical consultation is no longer required. Williams looked up from her coordination activities with obvious gratitude. Ms. Vasquez, your expertise has been essential to preventing what could have been a national catastrophe. On behalf of the federal law enforcement community, thank you. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of tactical responsibility beginning to lift from her shoulders. For the first time in 3 years, she had been involved in a military operation that had saved lives rather than cost them. The silver fragment at her throat no longer felt like a reminder of failure and loss. As she prepared to leave the operations center, Elena realized that the broken piece of her silver star had finally come to represent what it was originally intended to symbolize: service in defense of innocent lives and the values that made that service worthwhile. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the workshop at Precision Defense Solutions, cleaning weapon scopes with the same precision and care she'd always brought to the work. But something fundamental had changed in how she approached the routine tasks that had once been her refuge from a world where her decisions affected life and death. The silver fragment still hung around her neck, but it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it had become a reminder of her capacity to serve something larger than her own pain and limitations. Elena, Tom Bradley called from the front office, there's someone here to see you. Elena looked up to see Jack Richards standing in the doorway, but this time, he wasn't wearing the serious expression of someone bringing classified missions and tactical challenges. Instead, he was smiling with what appeared to be genuine satisfaction. Jack, she said, setting down the scope she'd been working on. I wasn't expecting to see you again. I wanted to update you on the final results of the operation, he said, stepping into the workshop. And to thank you for your service. Elena gestured for him to sit while she continued working, finding that the routine activities helped her process the emotional weight of what they'd accomplished together. How final were the results? Jack consulted a folder that contained what Elena assumed were declassified summaries of the operation's outcome. 41 of the 42 Meridian Group operational teams were successfully interdicted. All stolen targeting systems have been recovered. The command structure has been dismantled, and key personnel are in federal custody. Elena looked up from her work. What about the one team that wasn't interdicted? Quote, they were apprehended attempting to cross the Canadian border. Apparently, they decided that discretion was the better part of valor once they realized the scope of the federal response. Elena felt a sense of completion that she hadn't experienced since before Marcus Chen's death. Any intelligence on what they were ultimately planning? Jack's expression grew more serious. Coordinated attacks designed to assassinate key political figures while simultaneously disrupting critical infrastructure. The goal was to create a national crisis that would benefit their foreign clients' strategic interests. Elena understood the implications. They had prevented not just terrorist attacks, but an operation designed to destabilize the American government and create opportunities for foreign exploitation of the resulting chaos. There's something else, Jack continued. The success of this operation has led to some significant policy changes regarding counterterrorism coordination and the security of advanced military technologies. Elena wasn't sure she wanted to know the details of policy implications, but she was curious about one aspect of their successful mission. What about the people who were involved in the operation? The federal agents, the intelligence analysts, the tactical teams? Jack smiled. Several commendations, some promotions, and a general recognition that interagency coordination can be extremely effective when it's done right. Elena nodded, satisfied that the people who had risked their lives to prevent the attacks were receiving appropriate recognition. What about you? Are you still working on cases that require civilian technical consultation? Actually, Jack said, that's part of why I'm here. The success of this operation has demonstrated the value of bringing civilian expertise into federal counterterrorism efforts, There's been some discussion about formalizing that kind of consultation. Elena felt her chest tighten at the prospect of additional operational involvement. I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of ongoing commitment. I understand, Jack said quickly, and there's no pressure. But I wanted you to know that your expertise is valued, and that there are opportunities if you're ever interested in serving again. Elena considered the offer while continuing to work on the precision scope in her hands. 3 weeks ago, she would have immediately declined any suggestion of ongoing involvement in military or law enforcement operations. But her experience with the Meridian Group had demonstrated that her skills and knowledge could be used to protect innocent lives, rather than just carry guilt over those she hadn't been able to save. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. There's no timeline or pressure. The offer stands whenever you might be interested. As Jack prepared to leave, Elena realized there was something she wanted to tell him about her experience with the operation. Jack, I want you to know that being involved in this mission, it helped me process some things I'd been carrying since Afghanistan. Jack paused at the doorway. I'm glad to hear that. Dr. Torres mentioned that successful mission completion can sometimes provide positive psychological outcomes for veterans dealing with combat-related trauma. Elena nodded. It wasn't that the operation erased what happened to Marcus or fixed my PTSD, but it reminded me that my military skills and experience can be used for something positive rather than just being sources of guilt and regret. That's exactly what your Silver Star was supposed to represent in the first place, Jack said gently. Elena touched the silver fragment at her throat. I'm beginning to understand that. After Jack left, Elena returned to her work with a sense of purpose and clarity that she hadn't felt in years. The routine tasks of precision optics maintenance still provided the structure and focus that helped manage her psychological symptoms, but they no longer felt like an escape from a world where she couldn't make a positive contribution. Instead, they felt like preparation for whatever opportunities might arise to use her expertise in service of something larger than her own pain and limitations. Dr. Sarah Chen called that afternoon to update Elena on the intelligence analysis that had followed the successful operation. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of the Meridian Group's international connections, she reported. The operation you helped prevent was just the beginning of what they had planned. Elena felt grateful that they had stopped not just the immediate threat, but a broader campaign that could have resulted in casualties on a much larger scale. What happens to the people who were arrested? Federal prosecution for terrorism, arms trafficking, and conspiracy charges. Most of them are looking at life sentences. Sarah's voice carried the satisfaction of someone who had helped achieve justice for her brother's death. Marcus would have been proud of what you accomplished. Elena smiled, feeling for the first time that she might be worthy of that pride. I think he would have been proud of what we all accomplished together. That evening, Elena sat in her apartment looking at photographs from her deployment with Marcus Chen and the other soldiers she'd served with in Afghanistan. For 3 years, those pictures had been too painful to look at, reminders of loss and failure that triggered anxiety and depression. But now, she found herself remembering not just Marcus's death, but his enthusiasm for the mission and his belief in the importance of their service. She remembered the 17 soldiers who had made it home from that Afghan valley because of shots she'd taken under impossible conditions, and the innocent people who were alive today because federal agents had prevented the Meridian Group's attacks. The silver fragment caught the lamplight as Elena finally understood what Jack had meant about what her silver star was supposed to represent. It wasn't a medal celebrating her individual accomplishments, or a reminder of her personal failures. It was a symbol of service in defense of values and people that made that service worthwhile, regardless of the personal cost. Elena looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror as she prepared for bed, noting that the haunted expression she'd carried for 3 years was beginning to fade. She still had PTSD, still experienced anxiety and depression, still carried the emotional scars of combat trauma. But she also had something she'd lost in that Afghan valley, a sense of purpose that transcended her personal pain and connected her to something larger than her own limitations. The next morning, Elena arrived at work to find a package waiting for her with official government markings. Inside was a letter of commendation signed by the director of the FBI, thanking her for extraordinary service in defense of national security and innocent lives. Also in the package was a small velvet box containing a complete Silver Star medal, not a replacement for the one that had been damaged in Afghanistan, but a new recognition of service that honored what she had accomplished in preventing the Meridian Group's attacks. Elena held the medal for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought her from the broken fragment she'd carried as a reminder of failure to this symbol of redemption through service. She decided to keep both, the fragment as a reminder of the price of service and the complete medal as a symbol of the possibility for healing and continued contribution despite that price. Tom Bradley appeared in the workshop doorway with a smile that suggested he'd been expecting the package. "Congratulations, Elena. I don't know what you did, but it must have been pretty important to warrant that kind of recognition." Elena smiled, feeling at peace with her choices for the first time in years. "I helped prevent some bad people from hurting innocent civilians. It felt like the right thing to do. Will you be staying here at the shop, or are there other opportunities calling?" Elena considered the question while looking around the workshop that had been her sanctuary for 3 years. "I think I'll be staying for now. But I'm open to serving again if the right opportunity arises." Tom nodded, understanding that Elena had found a balance between the civilian life that provided stability and the military service that gave her purpose. "Well, you'll always have a place here, and if you ever need time off for government consultation work." Elena laughed, realizing that Tom had probably suspected her military background long before Jack Richards had appeared with his classified missions and technical challenges. "Thank you, Tom, for giving me a place to heal and for understanding what I needed even when I didn't understand it myself." As Elena returned to work, she found herself thinking about the future with something approaching optimism. She still had challenges to face, psychological healing to continue, and decisions to make about how to balance her civilian life with potential opportunities for continued service. But for the first time since Marcus Chen's death, Elena felt that her military skills and experience represented assets rather than burdens, and that her future could include contributions to something larger than her own survival and recovery. The silver fragment and the complete medal both hung around her neck as she worked, reminders of different aspects of the same truth, that service in defense of innocent lives was worth the personal cost, and that redemption was possible even after the deepest failures. Elena Vasquez, civilian contractor and former Army Ranger, was ready for whatever opportunities might arise to serve again. But this time she would approach that service with wisdom earned through pain, skills refined through experience, and the knowledge that her contributions could make a difference in protecting the people and values she'd sworn to defend. The broken piece of her silver star had finally become what it was always meant to be, not a symbol of failure, but a reminder of the courage required to serve despite the risk of loss, and the possibility of finding redemption through continued dedication to something larger than oneself.